In recent decades, except for the Wang family of Beihai and the Li family at their peak, no force in the Dark World could have such a luxurious lineup. What was more, the two invincible realm experts who could be listed on the divine list were just disciples. Or rather, they were lackeys. The invincible realm was the peak of the Dark World. There were billions of people in the world, but how many of them could reach this level? There were a total of 30 people on the divine and holy lists, and there were a few who didn't have time to get on the list after they broke through the realm. There were only so many people. There were invincible realm experts who hid their names, but there were fewer of them than those who didn't get on the list, and they wouldn't affect the general trend. Every expert in the invincible realm, no matter strong or weak, was a strong-willed person. Regardless of whether they were noble or despicable, they all had their own dignity in their hearts. If these two disciples united and cooperated, with Jifeng Sword Training School as the foundation, within a few years, it would be enough to establish a superpower in the Dark World. It was as difficult as ascending to heaven to make such people their lackeys. How did His Majesty do it? And what was his ultimate purpose in doing all this? One question after another emerged in Deity's mind, and eventually became a mess. He subconsciously wanted to check Lu Xingcangquan and the Vice Marshal of the Holy Disarmament Corps, but his intuition told him that it would basically be useless. He didn't agree to cooperate with His Majesty, nor did he refuse. This negotiation seemed to be useless, but some foundations had been laid. The night was getting darker. The heavy rain outside the club was getting wilder. All the lights in the West Lake Club were completely turned on. The bright light shone out in the night rain, bringing out a halo. The lights were intertwined in the rain curtain. In the deep night, there was an intertwined dreamy light, like a rainbow, beautiful. A low-key Volkswagen slowly entered the West Lake Club in the heavy rain. At 3 o'clock in the middle of the night, a figure passed through the rain curtain and walked into the box where Li Guangtu was. Li Guangtu was still silent and didn't seem to notice that someone had come in. But His Majesty had an appointment with him today, and he had an appointment with others here. "Greetings, Your Majesty." The figure in a black suit placed the black umbrella in his hand in the corner of the box and bowed slightly to Deity. His tone was respectful and his posture was serious, showing a very formal respect and deference. "Your Majesty?" Deity turned his head to look at the deeply bowed figure and laughed at himself. "What kind of majesty am I? I don't like this title. Your martial arts are unparalleled, and your sword intent is strong enough to compete with the Sword Emperor. Naturally, you deserve the title of His Majesty." The figure in the black suit slowly straightened up. He wasn't short, but he couldn't be considered burly. However, as he stood there, he gave off an extremely tough and straight feeling. His delicate and clean appearance wasn't particularly outstanding, but his temperament was extremely eye-catching. The corners of his mouth were gently pursed, and he looked resolute and cold, but his eyes were calm and indifferent. This was the face of a young man, 27 or 28 years old. A face that almost all the young masters in Jianghu State now knew. A face that even left a deep impression on the world in the final maneuver a few days ago. Jiang Shangyu's face. Deity looked at Jiang Shangyu calmly and narrowed his eyes slightly. "Deity. Jiang Shangyu." This was a meeting that no one had expected, and it was also the first official meeting between the two. There was no appreciation in Deity's eyes, only a touch of satisfaction, as if he was looking at a chess piece that could be used. Jiang Shangyu's expression was very calm and respectful. It was hard to say whether he took the initiative to contact the Purgatory of Heaven capital, or the Purgatory of Heaven capital looked for him. In some seemingly accidental but actually inevitable coincidences, the two sides had a connection. The first time Jiang Shangyu did something for the Purgatory of Heaven capital was 2 years ago. No one knew this. Even Jiang Shan didn't know. "You did well in the final maneuver." Deity looked at him for a while and said lightly, "I am looking forward to your future." Jiang Shangyu hesitated, as if he didn't know how to address him. Finally he said softly, "You flatter me." "It's not a compliment." Deity shook his head. "What I like is your potential. If you tell me that you have no potential, it only proves that I have no vision. There is no need for modesty in the Purgatory of Heaven capital. If a capable person deliberately lowers his position, he is incompetent. You have determined your path to the invincible realm before you are 30 years old. Before you are 40 years old, you are expected to be invincible. In the future, you may be able to stand at the top of the divine list. Jiang Shangyu stood silently and did not speak. In the past 2 years you have done a few things for the Purgatory of Heaven capital, and you have done a good job. The Jiang family is in a delicate position now. I can see the direction of your efforts. To some extent, there is no conflict between my direction and the Jiang families. And you, and your family, can play a big role in my chessboard. That's why I see you today. Deity looked at Jiang Shangyu's calm face and chuckled. His voice was very low, but because it was very real and clear, it sounded very loud in Jiang Shangyu's ears. Jiang Shangyu, would you like to join the Purgatory of Heaven capital? This question was not difficult to answer. If he was unwilling, Jiang Shangyu would not have come today. 2 years ago, he would not have contacted the people of the Purgatory of Heaven capital. So he nodded without hesitation and said with a smile, I am willing to be a chess piece in your Majesty's hands. He still called him Your Majesty. Deity did not say much but said calmly, When I come to Jianghu State, there will be a place for the Jiang family beside me. Jiang Shangyu bent down deeply and bowed. In the future, you will contact me directly and be responsible for me. Deity continued. In the Purgatory of Heaven capital, it was a great honor to be able to contact Deity directly. This could be regarded as a reward. Okay. Jiang Shangyu responded respectfully, but a trace of hesitation flashed across his face. What's wrong? Deity raised his eyebrows. Something is wrong with Lang Yu. As Jiang Shangyu spoke, he looked up at Deity and said, Recently, she has little contact with me. Her state seems to be a little special. Purgatory of Heaven capital, Lang Yu. This was a secret name among the higher-ups of the Purgatory of Heaven capital. In the past 2 years, it was not Dawn Daybreak who had contact with Jiang Shangyu, but Lang Yu. It was the most convenient for her to contact Jiang Shangyu. However, Jiang Shangyu noticed that she seemed to be in trouble. Deity was silent for a while. It's okay. He thought for a moment and said, She can solve it herself. Jiang Shangyu nodded and asked, Does your Majesty need me to go to Eastern Europe? Jianghu State has restarted the snow dance corps. If your Majesty needs, I can operate myself into the snow dance corps. No need. Deity shook his head and personally poured a glass of red wine for Jiang Shangyu. The wine was good. But after a long time, the taste inevitably faded. How are your injuries? He asked. Jiang Shangyu's hand holding the wine glass paused, shook his head and said, It's not a big problem. I can recover in half a year. The main problem is the realm drop, but it's not serious. Now I'm still in the thunder-shocking realm. In the final maneuver, he, Wang Shengxiao, Gu Hanzhan, and Song Ci were seriously injured by Li Tianlan. Gu Hanzhan, who had not dropped his realm, had the lightest injury. Wang Shengxiao and Song Ci chose the most violent realm drop attack at the same time. They fell directly from the peak of the thunder-shocking realm to the peak of the fire-flaming realm. At this time, they were the most seriously injured. Jiang Shangyu also dropped his realm drop attack. But he stayed at the peak of the fire-flaming realm for 3 years. In the fire-flaming realm, he could not be more perfect. So his realm drop attack only made him drop back a small realm. Compared with before the final maneuver, his realm was still higher. As long as he recovered from his injury, it would not be a big problem. And now he had his own path. In the following time, he did not need a long closed-door training in silence. What he needed most was to stimulate his potential between life and death and broaden his road to the invincible realm. Then you go to Tiannan. Deity said. Tiannan. Jiang Shangyu repeated it, a little confused. East Emperor Palace will also go to Tiannan. Deity's tone was calm. East Emperor Palace. Tiannan. Jiang Shangyu's body suddenly shook. In an instant, the pattern of all the forces operating together in Tiannan suddenly became clear in front of him. The members of East Emperor Palace connected with the major forces inside and outside Tiannan. Just for a moment, Jiang Shangyu understood what Tiannan meant to Li Tianlan. Tiannan is great. Jiang Shangyu took a deep breath and muttered to himself. Deity did not speak. For him, East Emperor Palace was actually not important. In the chaos of Eastern Europe, he had to get that flower. If he wanted to get that flower, he had to get Li Tianlan's body. Once Li Tianlan died, East Emperor Palace would be meaningless to Tiannan. However, if there was no East Emperor Palace in that place, It would still be the battlefield between the Purgatory of Heaven capital and the Wang family of Beihai in the future. At this time, if Xianxia, a hidden pawn, was buried there, it might play an unexpected role. And, in case Li Tianlan survived this time, Jiang Shangyu in Tiannan could also become a key pawn for deity and Li Tianlan to compete for the dominance of the Purgatory of Heaven capital. He was the supreme ruler of the Purgatory of Heaven capital. But the Purgatory of Heaven capital belonged to the Li family. During the years when the Li family collapsed, deity did not know what the old man, who was good at playing chess, had planned. But the Purgatory of Heaven capital was definitely one of his biggest plans. The Purgatory of Heaven capital was very strong. Deity liked this plan very much. But the only thing he did not like was the position of some backbone forces of the Purgatory of Heaven capital. Deity believed that those backbone forces were loyal enough to him. But the bad thing was that they were also loyal enough to Li Tianlan. What Li Honghe hoped most was that deity and Li Tianlan could coordinate the power within the Purgatory of Heaven capital, and finally let Li Tianlan control the entire Purgatory of Heaven capital in Tiannan, and then return to Jianghu state to restore the glory of the Li family. This required deity to be willing to let go. But how could he be willing? If he was not willing, he had to struggle and rob. For deity, if Li Tianlan died in Eastern Europe, there would be no hidden danger in the future of the Purgatory of Heaven capital. This was the best ending. But if the chaos in Eastern Europe could not be resolved as he wished, he would let Jiang Shangyu go now, and then it might play an unexpected role. Jiang Shangyu, Li Tianlan, Di Jiang. Deity looked at Jiang Shangyu thoughtfully. Among the three, if the latter two were at the same level, then Jiang Shangyu was undoubtedly too weak. Deity's eyes were a little hesitant. In his mind, Li Tianlan, Wang Shangxiao, Jiang Shangyu, Gu Hanzhan, Song Xiai, and Dongqing Rushi were undoubtedly the most promising young people in Jianghu state. And this was also the most correct order of strength in his mind. Li Tianlan was very strong. But deity did not think that he deserved the glory of the Li family in the past. He could not win over Wang Shangxiao and Song Xiai. As for Gu Hanzhan, deity had no prejudice against Gu Hanzhan. He just correctly thought that all the people in Kunlun City were worthless clowns. He did not bother to target anyone. To put it simply, he simply looked down on them. The halo of Gu Hanshan's heavenly king heart was indeed dazzling enough. But in deity's view, he was not even as good as Jiang Shangyu, who had a poor foundation. Dongqing Rushi was in a special state. In this way, among the most outstanding young people in Jianghu state, the only one he could cultivate was Jiang Shangyu. Whether he was to use him to fight against Li Tianlan, Di Jiang, or Wang Shangxiao in the future, Jiang Shangyu seemed to be a little unqualified. His talent was outstanding enough, but in martial arts, pure talent and physique could not determine everything. Jiang Shangyu was not as good as Wang Shangxiao now. The most important thing was that the Jiang family did not have the martial arts inheritance and martial arts concept that had been accumulated for hundreds of years and was infinitely close to perfection. There was silence in the box. In the somewhat depressing atmosphere, Jiang Shangyu blinked, chuckled and asked in confusion, "Your Majesty? Would you like to learn swordsmanship from me?" Deity suddenly said. The immortality seal of the Purgatory of Heaven capital was famous in the dark world. Everyone knew that deity's weapon was a huge and somewhat exaggerated death scythe. But whether it was the immortality seal or the death scythe, what broke out in the end was sword intent. Only sword intent. It was based on the Li family's 24 moves of sword and became more subtle. It was deity's invincible path. Jiang Shangyu froze for a moment. His face showed shock little by little, and finally became ecstatic. "Your Majesty." His voice trembled a little. Before coming here today, he never thought that he would have such an opportunity. He had his own invincible path. If he had deity's guidance. "You don't want to?" Deity asked with a smile. I do. Jiang Shangyu's expression trembled. He didn't seem to know what to say, so he could only bow deeply. "Do you know why I chose you?" Deity looked at Jiang Shangyu. His eyes were not soft but calm. "Not only because you are my only choice at the moment, but also because you are ambitious, but you are very clear-headed. Your family is also very clear-headed." It took the Jiang family several generations to climb up generation by generation. It's not easy to get to where it is today. You know what your status means today, and you know the consequences of losing it in your heart. This is the awe in your heart. So you have a request. but it's not a big one. In my opinion, this is stability. I like people who are stable. So, again, I look forward to your future in the purgatory of Heaven Capital. Xianxia bowed deeply and didn't get up for a long time. Deity reached out his hand. There was sword intent in the air. The sword intent was condensed and heavy. The air in the entire box seemed to solidify. Deity's fingers slid in the air. A faintly discernible line was drawn in the transparent air by the sword intent. Imprinting words and pictures in the void with sword intent was by no means an ordinary means of the invincible realm. When Xianxia raised his head, Deity had already carved a giant tree in the air with sword intent. The giant tree was full of leaves and transparent, but it was faintly shining in the air. The sword energy was extremely dazzling. In my eyes, martial arts is a tree. Decisively and calmly, Deity taught Xianxia the first lesson. The root of the tree is the starting point of martial arts and the foundation. The deeper the root is under the ground, the bigger the tree will be. The 4 realms of martial arts are the trunk, chi-controlling realm, ice-condensing realm, fire-flaming realm, and thunder-shocking realm. The more accumulated, the thicker the trunk will be. In a sense, it can affect the final achievement. Deity looked at the leafy tree in the air. Above the trunk is the canopy. The martial path is very big, and this tree is also very big, so the canopy is very luxuriant. Thousands of branches form the canopy, so in my heart the canopy is the path, and each branch is a different path. Look at this tree. Deity's tone was focused and calm. The trunk is the 4 realms of martial arts, and these different branches represent different heights. The Thundershocking realm, the peak of the Thundershocking realm, the half-step invincible realm, the worst invincible realm, the ordinary invincible realm, the slightly worse invincible realm, the stronger invincible realm, the normal invincible realm, the strong invincible realm, the peak of the invincible realm. The road is chosen by oneself. Deity said, each branch that forms the canopy grows upward at the beginning, but for various reasons, in the end, the branches will fall down. Only a few of them can always go up. This is the right way. So in the dark world, most of the half-step invincible realm experts can't enter the real invincible realm. The road has length, and so does the branch. The final height of the branch also means the strength after entering the invincible realm. Here. Deity reached out and pointed. He pointed to the highest point in the book. Looking along his finger, Xianxia didn't know whether he was pointing at a leaf or a branch, but he was indeed the highest point. There is a saying about the chosen one in the dark world. The chosen one stands in the highest position and has absolute combat capability and dominance. If the chosen one really exists, this is the position of the chosen one. He waved his hand. The air began to fluctuate silently. The lush canopy began to disappear in large swaths. The drooping branches were gone, and the branches that grew horizontally were also disappearing. The branches that were going up but not high enough were also disappearing. In the blink of an eye, only a few tallest branches were left flickering in the air. Deity looked at the picture he had created. His eyes were a little complicated. Xianxia counted the branches. It was easy to count the branches. 4. 2 of them were in the highest position, and it was hard to tell which one was higher. The other 2 had a difference in height, but it was very small, and they were also in the position closest to the highest. I don't know much about martial arts. I know a little about the 24 moves of sword. Because of the relationship between the Li family and the Wang family of Beihai, I also know a little about the 6 paths of reincarnation. Deity calmly pointed to the lowest of the 4 branches. If the chosen one is at the top, then I should be in this position. Starting from the root all the way up, this is my path and my current position. The branch that represented his path was really high. It was very close to the top 2 branches that were level with each other. It was even closer to another branch. Xianxia seemed to feel a little strange. He looked at another branch. The branch that was a little higher than Deity and a little lower than the top 2 branches. That is? He asked. That is Wang Tianzong's position. Deity calmly said, our paths are different. My path is truth and darkness. Wang Tianzong's path is illusion and light. There is no difference between the 2 paths. If I hadn't been injured, I could have reached Wang Tianzong's height. What he said could not be considered absolute authority, but it was more credible than most people's. Xianxia stared at a few branches. His eyes fell on the top 2 branches, and he was thinking about Deity's words. The real night. The illusory day. It was extremely pure. So their sword intent would be pure, pure enough to tear everything. Wang Tianzong. Deity. This was already the peak of this era in the dark world. What kind of demeanor does a heaven's favorite have? If the top two branches are the chosen one, can the chosen one walk side by side? Jiang Shangyu asked. That's not the chosen one. It's just the position that the chosen one should be in. That's the end of martial arts. I think I can't get there, so I chose my current path. Wang Tianzong also thinks he can't get there, so he chose his own path. What you mean are two different but somewhat similar paths of the chosen one. What kind of path? Jiang Shangyu asked seriously. You've seen it. Deity said. In the final maneuver, the forever silent world vaguely had the embryonic form of the chosen one's path. Li Tianlan's current sword intent represents a path of the chosen one. Reality and illusion. Deity's path was real and dark. Wang Tianzong's path was illusion and light. The combination of reality and illusion was the real path of the chosen one. Jiang Shangyu suddenly fell silent. He already knew the other path. He smiled bitterly. After a moment of silence he still asked, in addition to Li Tianlan's path, the other path of the chosen one? Darkness and light, of course. Deity said calmly, it's also day and night. The heavy rain passed through the night and fell in the morning. The rain lessened a little. Deity had left for a long time. Jiang Shangyu sat in the position where Deity had sat all night, looking up at the tree that still existed in the air. The sword intent left by Deity was very faint. The tree also faded a lot. Jiang Shangyu looked at it quietly. His eyes were obscure, with one or countless emotions that were hard to understand. Illusion and light. Reality and darkness. Both could lead to the strongest peak of the invincible realm. Illusion and reality. Day and night. It was the path of the chosen one. Jiang Shangyu closed his eyes silently. The sword stroke of Li Tianlan in the final maneuver reappeared in his mind. The sword was not a sword. It was just a green leaf. But the green leaf was also a sword. Everything was a sword. The green leaf drifted in the domain of nothingness. The world quieted down, shrank, and fell into silence. Mountains, rivers, lakes, seas, cities, tall buildings, everything seemed to disappear completely, become false, and become nothingness. The green leaf drifted, neither fast nor slow. It smashed Gu Hanshan's ninth secluded impasse, Wang Shengxiao's and Song Si's sword light, and his starry sky. The sword intent was still condensed and did not dissipate. It was so real that it seemed to crush everyone's will. Reality and illusion. Reality and illusion. Jiang Shangyu suddenly opened his eyes. Cold sweat had seeped out of his forehead. The cold sweat flowed down his face and fell on his clothes. Jiang Shangyu suddenly burst out laughing. His eyes were distorted, his face ferocious, and his laughter was sad and desperate. The tree in the air was still flashing. No one knew that Jiang Shangyu was not desperate because of Li Tianlan's sword stroke. It was because of something else. Something else. He laughed for a long time, bent over on the sofa, and finally knelt on the ground. He laughed so hard that he could not stand up straight. After a long time, he slowly stood up with his hand on the wall. His fingers touched the button on the wall. Soft music began to play, surrounding the private room. Jiang Shangyu sat back on the sofa, reached out to pour himself a glass of wine, and drank it silently. The wine was good. But it tasted bad. He did not like red wine, and he had never liked it. The tree in the air disappeared. Jiang Shangyu drank the wine in big gulps. His eyes were a little blurred, and he seemed to be drunk. But his heart was calm. He saw the end of martial arts that Deity showed him, saw Deity's path, and even got Deity's sword intent. He needed these very much. But they were not his after all. He had his own path. Jiang Shangyu took a deep breath and thought about Tiannan. He learned swordsmanship from Deity. Deity was his teacher. His teacher wanted him to go to Tiannan, maybe to guard against Di Jiang, or against Li Tianlan. But until Deity left, he did not tell Deity about his cooperation with Li Tianlan. Jiang Shangyu finished drinking the red wine, lay on the sofa, and looked at the ceiling with dull eyes. He needed Deity's martial arts. But he really did not like to let Deity be his teacher. He also did not like the swords of the Li family and the Wang family of Beihai. If he and deity were born in the same era, he firmly believed that he had the capital to compete with deity. Hey, hee. Jiang Shangyu's eyes were dull and he laughed again. No one knew whether it was a sneer or a drunken laugh. In the hazy and soft music, his drunken murmur was suppressed. I hate God for taking 20 years from me. Mount Dibing. It was drizzling. Beihai province was close to the sea. There was a lot of rain and snow, but it rarely rained heavily. It was often drizzling and raining. The rain began a few days ago and gradually slowed down, but it never stopped. It went through several nights and mornings. According to the weather station, it seemed to last until tomorrow night. In the rainy sky in the early morning, a black Mercedes-Benz slowly drove to the top of Mount Dibing after passing several checkpoints. The Mercedes-Benz came directly to the Emperor Hall where Wang Tianzong usually lived. At 5 o'clock in the morning. At this time, Wang Tianzong should not have gotten up yet. The door of the Mercedes-Benz opened. Xianming, the chief intelligence officer of the Wang family of Beihai, who had disappeared for a period of time on Mount Dibing, pushed the door and got out of the car with a tired face. At the same time, a middle-aged man about 50 years old followed him out of the car. The middle-aged man was slightly plump, wore a pair of glasses, and was dressed very well. He looked like a successful person who had achieved success and recognition. However, at this time, he stood beside Xianming and looked at the bustling Mount Dibing around, but he seemed a little timid, so that he was somewhat out of tune with the atmosphere on Mount Dibing. Xianming did not care about this. He looked at the closed door of the Emperor Hall, hesitated, and stepped forward to press the doorbell. At the same time he raised his voice and said, "Your Majesty, Xianming wants to see you." His voice was clear and powerful. It passed through the door and resounded in the Emperor Hall. The Emperor Hall was silent for a moment, and the bedroom on the second floor lit up. "What's the matter?" Wang Tianzong's steady voice sounded. "I found something, and I need your Majesty to look at it immediately." Xianming's expression was strange. Thinking of the news, his eyes looked as if he had seen a ghost. "It's about Qin Weibai." A few days ago, Wang Tianzong asked him to investigate Qin Weibai at all costs. Xianming already had the news. It was not fast. But the object of the investigation was the mysterious Qin Weibai. So the speed of getting the news was not slow. But Xianming was not sure whether his investigation was going well. The result of this investigation was simply the weirdest information he had ever received in his life. Xianming himself could not even explain some things. But he must send these things to Wang Tianzong as soon as possible. The door of the Emperor Hall opened slowly. Wang Tianzong, still in pajamas, appeared at the door, looking calm. He looked at Xianming, who was travel-worn and bloodshot. His eyes softened a little and he nodded. "Who is this?" His eyes fell on the middle-aged man behind Xianming, with some doubts. In the investigation of Qin Weibai, this is a very key figure. Xianming said. Wang Tianzong said yes and waved his hand. "Come in and talk." Xianming nodded and looked back at the middle-aged man. The middle-aged man held a bag tightly in his hand. Xianming's eyes fell on the bag first. In an instant, that strange and inexplicable feeling emerged in his heart again. A refreshing morning breeze blew in front of the Emperor Hall. Xianming's body trembled, and he suddenly felt that the midsummer morning was very cold. There should be one more chapter before I enter Eastern Europe. I often write things from the perspective of the protagonist. This is a bad habit. But in the environment of special warfare, before the protagonist plays an important role, God and the Sword Emperor can actually represent the main line. But it should not be like this next time. 8,500 word chapters, you know. Chapter 406. There were accidents in everything. There were big and small accidents. Obviously, His Majesty, or His Highness, who couldn't meet deity because of an accident, had a big accident. So that when Lu Xingchuan, the sword sage in East Island, received his video call, he could intuitively feel his hidden irritation. When the video call lit up, Lu Xingchuan just finished his meditation. East Island had been very lively in the past 3 years. The impact of the final battle of Heaven Capital had not completely disappeared. In some aspects it could even be said that there were still people crying. The rise of the purgatory of Heaven Capital and the demise of Liuhua Palace indirectly led to the rise and fall of some wealthy families in East Island. The Shinto suffered heavy losses in East Island. The upheaval of the superstructure directly threatened the current system, and countless politicians and ministers stepped down. At the beginning, the final battle of Heaven Capital was just a conflict in the Dark World, but then it swept the whole world in a very short time. The financial war led by Jianghu state, together with several European and American countries and wealthy families, was still the most shocking wound on East Island. In 3 years, the currency of East Island appreciated nearly 6 times, which not only meant that the wealth accumulated by East Island for decades was plundered by major countries and funds, but also meant that the overall economic order of East Island was completely chaotic. Under the influence of the financial war, the whole East Island was struggling to survive in the shadow of tragedy. The collapse of the economic order had become the most serious social problem, and the crime rate kept rising. This once known as the second economic power in Asia fell into a quagmire and fell into the abyss under the impact of money. The whole country seemed to be struggling in a huge mud but at a loss. As for the special warfare system and the dark world of East Island, the past 3 years were the process of the game between the purgatory of Heaven Capital, Wuxia Palace, and Jifeng Sword Raining School. Mai Shiranui, the Holy Virgin of Liuhua Palace, joined the purgatory of Heaven Capital, and the purgatory of Heaven Capital naturally accepted the power of Liuhua Palace. From the very beginning, they had a deep foundation, and the royal family did not have any defense against this superpower that suddenly rose. On the contrary, they gave a lot of support. Under such circumstances, even if Wuxia Palace and Jifeng Sword Raining School joined hands, they still struggled in the game with the purgatory of Heaven Capital. Moreover, there were grievances between Wuxia Palace and Jifeng Sword Raining School. Most of the time, the members of the Jifeng Sword Raining School were more willing to treat the Limitless Palace's palace master, Tianhai Wuji, as an abandoned disciple of the Jifeng Sword Raining School. But as the oldest holy land of swordsmanship in East Island, in the last 3 years, Jifeng Sword Raining School had long lost its glory as a holy land of swordsmanship. The reason was actually very simple. Among the 3 invincible realm experts in East Island, Lu Xingchuan, the master of Jifeng Sword Raining School and the Sage of Sword, was the weakest. In the last divine and holy lists, Lu Xingchuan ranked second on the holy and holy list, and he didn't even get on the divine list. His strength was a far cry from God's. Even compared to Tianhai Wuji, there was still a gap. Therefore, for the Jifeng Sword Raining School, the past 3 years had been 3 years of silence and humiliation. This was also the reason why he decided to become a disciple. It was very humiliating for an invincible realm expert to willingly crawl at the feet of others. Lu Xingchuan also had the dignity of the invincible realm. He also felt humiliated. But as the leader of the Jifeng Sword Raining School, if he could use this humiliation to prop up the glory of the Jifeng Sword Raining School, he was willing. This mysterious His Majesty could give him a lot of things. For example, the realm after the highest kendo of the Jifeng Sword Raining School. For example, the past grievances of the Jifeng Sword Raining School. For example, a good enough and absolutely feasible prospect. Another example would be some secretive but powerful partners. Lu Xingchuan marveled at everything about the other party. That was the power that was enough to control his fate. This kind of power, no matter who held it, could make Lu Xingchuan bow his head. Therefore, in the residence of the leader of the Jifeng Sword Raining School, Lu Xingchuan did not hesitate to connect the video as soon as he saw the video communication. It was dark and silent in the video. The camera on the opposite side seemed to be unintentionally blocked, so Lu Xingchuan could not see everything on the opposite side. But his figure was very clear in the video. Therefore, he bent down respectfully, bowed deeply and said meticulously, "Your Highness." In the dark screen the man responded, but his voice was suffocating. "I've talked to God," he said faintly. His voice was slow, a little hoarse, and almost cold out of control. "He refused your request?" Lu Xingchuan frowned unconsciously. This question was very important to him. The meeting between God and His Highness was his matchmaking. If the two sides could not cooperate, his life in East Island would undoubtedly be more difficult. Lu Xingchuan could not figure out why the other party refused. He just didn't agree. His Highness took several deep breaths. His negative emotions seemed to be a little out of control, and he kept inhaling, which sounded like he was crying. He has concerns. He doesn't trust me. Am I that scary? Lu Xingchuan was the sword sage of East Island, the leader of the Jifeng Sword Raining School. But for him, he was just a disciple. The second disciple. It was okay to call him Xiao, Lu Xingchuan did not think there was any problem, so he smiled and said sincerely, "Everything you have is awesome. He should trust me." His Highness was silent for a while and said calmly, "He should trust me. On the matter of Eastern Europe we have the same position. He should trust me." "Do you need me to do anything?" Lu Xingchuan asked. He knew that what he asked was nonsense, but sometimes nonsense was also a kind of attitude. If His Highness had no order, he would not open this video call with him. "I may try to persuade him, let him." "What's the use of persuasion?" His Highness interrupted him. He was silent for a while and said calmly, "You said that in the final battle of Heaven Capital 3 years ago, one of God's sons died?" Lu Xingchuan froze for a moment. "Is the news reliable?" His Highness asked. Lu Xingchuan thought about it seriously. "It should be reliable. Of course, there has been no specific news from the Purgatory of Heaven Capital. But after the final battle of Heaven Capital, the Purgatory of Heaven Capital, together with the royal family, used the resources of the government, and did investigate some things in Ninghu. The investigation was very detailed. It seemed that in the days of the final battle, a young man died. From some hidden channels, I got the news that the man should be the son of God," he said in a very cautious tone. "Huawu?" His Highness's tone was a little weird, like crying and laughing. "Huawu died?" "I don't know his name," Lu Xingchuan said. "God can't find anything," His Highness said calmly. Lu Xingchuan smiled and nodded. "From the information I received, it seems that the other party did not get any valuable clues." His Highness was silent. The silence became very long, perhaps even a very long time. The other side of the screen was still dark and silent. Lu Xingchuan waited silently, wondering if His Highness had fallen asleep. Time passed slowly. At a certain moment, Lu Xingchuan finally couldn't help but whisper, "Your Highness, do you know who killed Huawu's son?" "I know," His Highness said calmly, "but I'm hesitant to say it." Lu Xingchuan was a little excited. "If you can provide this news to the Purgatory of Heaven Capital, our cooperation with the Purgatory of Heaven Capital will become very stable." Silence. Another long silence ensued. His Highness's silence was a test of patience. Just when Lu Xingchuan was a little helpless, His Highness took a deep breath and whispered, "Indeed. But I have no evidence," he said. "The truth doesn't need evidence, especially for the dark world," Lu Xingchuan said meaningfully. He was really looking forward to the cooperation between His Highness and the Purgatory of Heaven Capital. In other words, he was looking forward to the scene of His Highness ruling the world in the future. At that time, Jifeng Sword Training School would also shine. The cooperation with the Purgatory of Heaven Capital was a very important step. Lu Xingchuan wanted to make it happen. "That's why I can't say it," His Highness whispered. Lu Xingchuan raised his eyebrows in confusion. There was no logical relationship in this sentence. If Huawu died, oh, the son of deity, do you know who is the most suspicious? His Highness laughed softly. Lu Xingchuan did not speak and listened quietly. "One is Qin Wei Bai, and the other is me." Deity's tone was a little complicated. "At this stage, only I or Qin Wei Bai, or only we can do it, are obsessed with killing Huawu." "But I didn't kill Huawu," His Highness said calmly, "so it's Qin Wei Bai, and it can only be Qin Wei Bai." Then, Lu Xingchuan looked at the screen, "Why can't your Highness say it?" "It's not that I can't say it, but it's risky to say it. I can tell deity, but I'm not sure if deity will believe it. If he doesn't believe it, he will naturally suspect me," His Highness said. "In fact, it won't be a big problem, Your Highness. If we haven't done it, we can always explain it clearly." Lu Xingchuan tried to follow deity's thinking. "It's true, so deity doesn't need to be afraid. Even if I can't explain it clearly, he won't know who I am." Deity laughed and his tone was a little cold. "But Qin Wei Bai will know. I provided the news of Huawu, and Qin Wei Bai can at least determine a general range to find me in this range. I don't have the confidence to deliberately hide absolutely. So the problem is that as long as Qin Wei Bai dies, no one will find out who I am. But if Qin Wei Bai doesn't die, I dare not tell deity the news of Huawu. But if I don't tell deity this news, deity will have concerns about the cooperation with me. Once there are concerns, that woman may not die. If she doesn't die, I will be exposed. What do you think I should do now? His voice was steady and gentle, and he sounded extremely serious. Lu Xingchuan didn't know if he understood the cause and effect in it, but he understood the situation. I see, he said. His Highness smiled and said nothing. I will let Jifeng Sword Raining School release some news. Lu Xingchuan said, Jifeng Sword Raining School is the local holy land of East Island. Deity knows that I am your follower. I will investigate this matter and release the news. Even if deity and Qin Weibai suspect you, they can't be sure. They should think that we want to cooperate with deity to investigate. We can fabricate some evidence and give it to the purgatory of heaven capital. I will handle this aspect. Deity is not easy to deceive or persuade. His Highness said blandly. Any invincible realm expert was not easy to deceive or persuade. The invincible realm always started from the weakest chi-controlling realm and created a straight path to the peak. Therefore, any invincible realm expert was not a fool. At least in terms of thinking and logic they were absolutely sharp. The thinking and logic of martial arts were often useful in the general trend. The most rigorous logic usually meant the keenest insight. I will take good care of it. Lu Xingchuan said calmly. His Highness pondered and nodded. That's it. Actually. He hesitated for a moment. Lu Xingchuan said softly. Your Highness, I personally think that at this time, we may tentatively contact the Wang family of Beihai. Their value is above the purgatory of heaven capital. Wang Tianzong? His Highness smiled and said simply. No. Why not? Lu Xingchuan asked. Beihai province is geographically very close to Eastern Europe. In fact, in the chaos of Eastern Europe, Beihai province is the most concerned point of all the superpowers. Wang Tianzong needs to consider a lot of things, and Wang Tianzong has his own position. We don't need to contact him. The result we pursue is actually the same. If we go to him at this time, he will doubt, investigate, and distract the energy and strength of the Wang family of Beihai. We can't affect Wang Tianzong. If we go to him now. His Highness smiled. Do you think he doesn't think enough and is not chaotic enough? Bayou country was not large. It was not large compared to the territory of snow country of tens of millions of square kilometers. In fact, looking at Eastern Europe and even the whole Europe, Bayou country could not be regarded as a particularly small country. Among the Eastern European countries, in terms of comprehensive strength, Bayou country should be second only to snow country. So Bayou country was very strong. But the Qin family of Bayou country was stronger. This was the top wealthy family in Eastern Europe. Even in the whole world it was a super wealthy family in the first line. The influence of the Qin family was not limited to Bayou country but radiated throughout Europe. The main industries of the family were concentrated in the fields of media, pharmaceuticals, shipping, and oil. As far as Bayou country was concerned, the strongest industry of the Qin family had almost reached a monopoly position in Bayou country. Behind it, the Qin family was the leading arms dealer in all of Europe and one of the strongest arms giants. This behemoth entrenched in Eastern Europe was a real local snake. In fact, in the chaos in Eastern Europe, the superpowers in the dark world who were involved in the chaos wanted the support of super wealthy families like the Qin family, Morton, and Violet family the most. This could almost be a guarantee for them to be invincible in the chaos of Eastern Europe. The helicopter entered the border of Bayou country directly from the sky of snow country. Qin Weibai sat elegantly and calmly in the cabin, turned his head to look at the mountains and cities below, and thought about the next meeting in silence. The Qin family was very strong. The old fox of the Qin family was even more astute. Qin Weibai did not have much contact with the Qin family in Eastern Europe. But in recent years, the cooperation between the two sides had never been interrupted, and they had always maintained a win-win relationship. This time, the cooperation with the Qin family might be the biggest gamble since the establishment of the cooperation relationship between the two sides. The old fox of the Qin family had made up his mind, but no one knew what decision he would make. The phone vibrated in her pocket. Qin Weibai took out the phone and looked at the text message on the phone. The Holy Disarmament Corps and Holy Punishment Priests of the Vatican officially entered Eastern Europe. He narrowed his eyes and thought of the unfathomable Pope in the Holy Land. This was the power of the Vatican. Although Knights Templars united with the Jianghu family of South America to destroy the largest group of elites of Samsara Palace in Eastern Europe. But Knights Templars was Knights Templars. It could not represent the Vatican. However, the Vatican could represent Knights Templars. This power might become an important bargaining chip to force the Qin family to take a stand. Qin Weibai thought quietly. Outside the cabin, the sunlight fell on her through the window. Bathed in a soft halo, she was motionless. She was as beautiful as an unreal cloud. Qin Weiyun sat opposite Qin Weibai and looked at Qin Weibai carefully but worshipfully. For the sister she had recognized in Europe a few years ago, in addition to worship, there was only a kind of almost fanatical, worship. She was indeed born in the Qin family in Eastern Europe, but strictly speaking, she was not a top socialite in Eastern Europe. She was not from the direct line of descent, but a branch of the Qin family, and it was not a very strong branch. Her status in the Qin family was ordinary. However, in recent years, because of the relationship between Qin Weibai and Samsara Palace, the branch of Qin Weiyun's family had gradually been valued and had some right to speak that they had not dared to imagine before. Qin Weiyun wanted to be a woman like Qin Weibai. Mysterious, perfect, elegant, calm, cold, arrogant, and superior, but she took it for granted to maintain her majesty. For Qin Weiyun, this was the most perfect woman. What are you looking at? Qin Weibai suddenly glanced at her and asked. Sister, you're really beautiful. Qin Weibai said softly, as if she was murmuring to herself. Qin Weibai smiled and reached out to touch Qin Weiyun's head. Qin Weiyun's face, which was as pure as water, turned red. She hesitated and asked a question she would ask every time they met. Sister, why are you called Qin Weibai? Qin Weibai tilted her head and looked at her. She thought for a moment and then smiled. Her smile was very casual, as if she was relieved after thinking. That smile was very beautiful. No matter how you looked at it, it was beautiful. Because your name is Qin Weiyun. The phone rang before Qin Weiyun spoke. Qin Weibai took out her phone and glanced at it. She raised her eyebrows slightly and answered the phone. Sir. Her tone was a little surprised. She had just boarded the plane and had not arrived at the Qin family yet. She did not know why Lin Fengting called. I got some news here. On the phone, Lin Fengting said in a low voice. Qin Weibai did not speak and listened quietly. The Wang family of Beihai. Tianzong seems to be investigating your background. Xianming went to the southwest in person. Kunlun City, the Prince Group, and the Wang family of Beihai worked together to investigate. It is said that Xianming has found something. At this time, it should have been sent to Mount Dibing. Qin Weibai blinked her eyes. Her long eyelashes fluttered. Her eyes were bright, with a very rational light. She nodded and thought for a moment. They should find a doctor. A hospital. There won't be anything else. You! Lin Fengting hesitated. A very subtle feeling rose from his heart. For a moment, he could not even be sure of his feelings. Obviously, Qin Weibai had expected such an investigation. Not only had she expected it, she could even tell what the other party would find out. But she did not destroy those things. If it was not too late, it could only mean that Qin Weibai had prepared for it. So what on earth did she prepare? What was the point of preparing these things? Now that the two sides were in the same position, Lin Yuxian asked directly, Did you prepare in advance? If I didn't prepare, how could they find the doctor? Qin Weibai said softly, Many people know that I came from a small mountain village in the southwest. The southwest is relatively backward. In many places, the household registration problem is unclear. After so many years, if I don't take the initiative to provide something, let alone the joint investigation of the three groups, even the whole Zhongzhou state, what can they find out? In fact, you are wrong. It is not Xianming who found something, but the intelligence took the initiative to find him. Lin Fengting was silent for a while. Obviously, he was digesting the news that Qin Weibai said. After a while, he continued to ask, In this case, did you provide this information to the Wang family of Beihai? What kind of information is it? It's meaningless information. Qin Weibai shook her head. I just made a casual remark at the beginning. I didn't expect to use it now. The information is true, but it is meaningless. But for the Wang family of Beihai, it is very important. So as long as Wang Tianzong gets the news, he will think. Sir, I have my eyes on the whole dark world, but the most attention is still on the Wang family of Beihai. Wang Tianzong is too strong. I have to give him new questions one after another. Useful information, useless news. I will throw it to him as much as I can. My goal is to make him think. Before anything happens, no one can tell if the information is useful or not. The more he thinks, the more confused he will be. As long as he is confused, I might be able to find an opportunity. Qin Weibai looked out of the window and whispered, "This is just the beginning." The sky in Beihai province was getting brighter. The rain outside the window was getting heavier. Xianming followed Wang Tianzong and entered Emperor Hall with a middle-aged man beside him. The decoration of Emperor Hall was very luxurious. But the biggest feeling it gave people was majesty and oppression. Especially the Black Main Hall, which was wide and grand, seemed to be full of oppressive power that made people breathless in silence. The middle-aged man sat on the sofa, trembling, and tightly held a bag in his hand. Wang Tianzong sat opposite Xianming, lit a cigarette, and took a deep breath. "Say it." In the faint smoke, Wang Tianzong looked at Xianming and said in a calm voice. Xianming opened his mouth, but suddenly he didn't know where to start. On the way from the southwest to Beihai province, he thought too much in his mind and organized a lot of words. But in the face of Wang Tianzong, suddenly, he couldn't say a word. He thought about the results of his inadvertent investigation. That kind of horrible and strange information hit his whole consciousness, and he didn't know where to start. Xianming thought for a while, picked up the cigarette box in front of Wang Tianzong and lit a cigarette for himself. "This is Dean Sunday," slowly, Xianming said in a low voice. "Your Majesty, Dean Sun is a doctor in a private hospital in Shuzhong." Wang Tianzong nodded. Shuzhong was located in the inland at the junction of Tianfu and Qinzhou province. Compared with developed cities, its development speed was slower. During the days when Xianming investigated Qin Weibai, he always kept in touch with him. The three groups worked together and finally determined the place where Qin Weibai first appeared. If there was no accident, it should be near Shuzhong. At the beginning, we visited some mountain villages in Shuzhong, but found nothing. But in the process of investigation, we conducted a joint investigation. Some people from Kunlun City and the Prince Group also appeared. The people were mixed together, and it was inevitable that there would be conflicts. Xianming glanced at Wang Tianzong. When the second team was investigating, our people had a conflict with the elites of Kunlun City and fought with them. We didn't suffer losses, but we injured several brothers. 2 of our brothers were seriously injured, so I arranged for them to stay in Dean Sun's hospital. Wang Tianzong listened quietly. Dean Sun's private hospital often receives some special patients, so he accepted our people happily. But after checking their injuries and wounds, that night, there was obvious fear and confusion in Xianming's eyes. He swallowed hard. His voice was dry as he said, "That night, the director called me into his office and took out a very old medical record." Wang Tianzong frowned. He vaguely felt that something was wrong. He subconsciously glanced at Dean Sun, who was sweating profusely. The medical records were from a long time ago. Director Sun took the medical records and asked me if I was a martial arts master. Xianming's tone was full of absurdity. He said that he had a medical record here, which he had come into contact with when he was young. He said that the wounds on the wounded were extremely special. Xianming's words were incoherent. He suddenly shook his head. He took out the bag from Dr. Sun's hand and handed it to Wang Tianzong. At the same time, he glanced at Executive Sun and said, "You tell him." "Ah." Dean Sun opened his mouth and stammered. However, he had communicated with Xianming several times on the way here, so he knew what to say. "About 20 years ago." Because of nervousness, Dean Sun's face became a little pale, and he spoke a little reluctantly. "That year, my wife and I had just gotten married, and we opened a private hospital." His tone was short and dry. In the winter of that year, it snowed heavily, and there were few people in the hospital. My wife and I were on duty in the hospital. When the spring festival was approaching, he said in a confused tone, there were no patients that night, but when it was almost 10 o'clock in the evening, several monks came to the hospital. "Monks?" Wang Tianzong asked. "Monks." Dean's son nodded. A middle-aged monk, and two relatively young monks. They seemed to be master and apprentice. The monk in the middle was holding a little girl in his arms. His tone was strange. The little girl was about 5 or 6 years old, or maybe 6 or 7 years old. She was covered with blood and wore a big red dress. She was seriously injured and looked like she was about to die. Wang Tianzong glanced at Xianming. Xianming nodded and said, "Great Master Wu Wei adopted Qin Wei Bai. That should be the first time he saw Qin Wei Bai. Go on." Wang Tianzong looked at Dean's son and nodded. At that time, the little girl was seriously injured, but she was very sober. She was about 5 or 6 years old. The big monk begged me to save her, but the little girl kept struggling and said no. She also asked the big monk to kill me and my wife, saying that I owed him a favor or something. At that time, she was bleeding a lot and bleeding on the ground. She was injured all over. Later, the big monk knocked her out, and then we took her to the emergency room. It was the first time I saw that kind of wounded person. Her injury was very strange, too strange. She was the strangest wounded person I have ever met, so I have kept this medical record. It's hard for me to imagine who would be so crazy to kill a child. I also wonder why the child could still be alive. It's so strange. It shouldn't be. Dean's son muttered to himself. She was insane. Killing. Wang Tianzong narrowed his eyes. Your Majesty, you'd better look at these photos. Xianming suddenly said, he took them that year, and there are X-rays. Wang Tianzong raised his eyebrows and reached out to pour out the things in the bag. One photo after another appeared in front of him, as well as an X-ray from more than 20 years ago. Wang Tianzong picked up one at random. It seemed to be the back of the little girl in the photo, but he couldn't be sure. In the whole photo, the little girl's skin could not be seen at all, and there were bloody wounds everywhere. Huge, bone-deep wounds crisscrossed in the blood. This was indeed the cruelest form of torture. The killer had no idea how many slashes he had made on the little girl's back. Dozens. Hundreds of slashes. Blood spread out on the photo. Wounds were everywhere, densely packed, and it seemed like there was no end to them. Wang Tianzong picked up another photo. This time, it looked like arms and legs, very delicate, but there were still countless wounds everywhere. Many of the wounds had turned over the flesh, and they were frozen stiff and pale. Wang Tianzong looked at the photo slowly. His movements became slower and slower, stiff and sluggish. He didn't know when his breathing had started to quicken. Even his usually calm gaze was filled with clear shock and disbelief. Wang Tianzong even felt that he was dreaming. He couldn't believe what he had seen. Finally, he picked up the X-ray. His palms were shaking violently. The X-ray was very clear, but Wang Tianzong was not a doctor, so he couldn't see anything. Here, these points are all wounds. The bones have been completely cracked, and the internal organs have been bleeding. We have confirmed that the girl should be Qin Wei Bai. At that time, almost every bone in Qin Wei Bai's body was broken. Her internal organs were almost completely collapsed, and her muscles and blood vessels were completely torn. As for her body, there were at least more than 500 sword wounds. He looked at Wang Tianzong with strange and fearful eyes. What do you want to say? Wang Tianzong said in a deep voice. This is not a cruel killing, but it is also a cruel killing. Xianming took a deep breath. It was true that someone was torturing Qin Wei Bai in the cruelest way, but they didn't kill her immediately. Instead, they threw her into the snow in winter, wanting her to freeze to death at the most painful time. Your Majesty, more than 500 wounds are all sword wounds. Such sword intent. Xianming opened his mouth and tried hard to say, I seem to know it. Wang Tianzong's body shook and he was silent. I know it too, he said slowly. There were many kinds of sword intent in the world. More than 500 wounds on Qin Wei Bai's body were caused by different sword intent, but it was also a sword. This sword contained several different kinds of sword intent, so a large amount of sword energy tore all her flesh and blood in an instant, destroyed her internal organs, and gave her the most insane torture. What kind of deep hatred was contained in this sword? And with the power of this sword, it was enough to kill Qin Wei Bai dozens of times. But Qin Wei Bai was still alive in the end. This kind of exquisite control. Wang Tianzong looked at these photos without saying a word. His palms were a little trembling. Xianming knew the sword intent in the photos. Wang Tianzong naturally knew it through these wounds. The countless fine wounds on Qin Weibai's back were the traces of the deceitful Taoist sword. The wounds on her spine that almost tore her body apart were the traces of the sword of Emperor Path. The sword energy tore her body, tore her bones and muscles. This was the domineering Taoist sword. The wounds that almost crippled her limbs came from the sword of Emperor Path. Her internal organs were injured at the same time, leaving an almost incurable hidden danger inside her body. Those were the traces of the sword of Divine Path and the sword of Divine Path. But this was just a sword. It repeated and reincarnated. This sword was the world-shaking unique skill that the Wang family of Beihai had used to look down on the dark world for hundreds of years. It was also their strongest sword. The sword of 6 paths of reincarnation. And this sword was used on a little girl back then. And it was to torture and kill. It was so absurd and so real. Wang Tianzong even had difficulty breathing for a while. What made him even more incredulous was how did this sword come out? Who did it? I can't do this. Wang Tianzong suddenly said, even if I break through now, I can't do this. Even if I completely break through the invincible realm, I can't do it. The sword energy of this sword was extremely strong. If it was Wang Tianzong, he could make the sword energy stronger and more majestic. But such a sword fell on a child and seriously injured her but did not die. This was no longer a matter of control, nor was it a matter of the so-called peak of the invincible realm and the chosen one. No one could do this. Wang Tianzong couldn't do it. Even the ancestors of the Wang family of Beihai, who created the 6 paths of reincarnation hundreds of years ago, couldn't do it. It was impossible to do it. There was no possibility at all. But this sword was imprinted in the photos at this time and appeared in front of Wang Tianzong. This was the weirdest thing. It could even be said to be the most supernatural thing. Chapter 407. It was August 6th. Yuzhou was hot. The blazing sun shone on every corner of Yuzhou, and the whole Yuzhou was immersed in a suffocating heat. In a closed private club inside the Forbidden City, Li Tianlan drank the special iced tea provided by the club, picked up a pen, and signed his name on the last contract in front of him. The club was called Chang'an. In Yuzhou, where celebrities were everywhere, there were countless private clubs of all sizes. The Chang'an Club inside the Forbidden City seemed inconspicuous. In terms of history, it was not as long as the Great Wall Club supported by the Prince Group. In terms of political atmosphere, it was not as good as the Lama Temple supported by the Southeast Group. In terms of international atmosphere, it was not as good as the beautiful land where the wealthy gathered. In terms of pleasure, it was not as good as the heavenly earth. It was not comparable to the Black Flag Club, which was full of stars and blood. But the Chang'an Club was the most luxurious club in Yuzhou and even the whole Jianghu state. The Chang'an Club had been established for less than 10 years, and less than 100 membership cards had been issued so far. To some extent, the membership card of the Chang'an Club was not something that could prove one's identity in the upper class. And the less than 100 members in the Chang'an Club did not value it either. What they valued were certain channels provided by the Chang'an Club. The Chang'an Club was really not big or famous. But it was very special. In Jianghu State, it was the only club that was at ease among the 6 groups, and it had the support of more than one heavyweight in the 6 groups. Zhou Yunhai, director of the North Group. Wu Qiuyang, minister of the academics. Qi Baizong, the former flag leader of the Special Warfare Group and the current top boss of Jianghu State. Secretary General Wu Shijiang of the Army Headquarters. Tong Xiaoshan, the Deputy Prime Minister of the Southeast Group. Chang Wandao, the Vice President of Jianghu State of the Academics. The first membership cards issued by the Chang'an Club were all extremely prominent names. Senior officials of Jianghu State. Patriarchs of wealthy families, dark forces, martial arts forces, iron-blooded generals. Everything was there. The membership card of the Chang'an Club was indeed not something that could prove one's identity. But the people who could have the membership card of the Chang'an Club had already passed the stage of needing something to prove their identity. Since its establishment, the Chang'an Club had always played its role in silence. The disputes and games under the table of the 6 groups of Jianghu State, the negotiations and compromises, the cooperation and transactions between the wealthy families, the promotion of wealth and power, the blood caused by the darkness and martial arts. Terrifying, hidden, low-key, efficient, shocking. In the past 10 years, the Chang'an Club was like a pair of eyes, silently watching everything that happened here. As long as the transactions that happened here were slightly publicized, it would be an unimaginable fortune. Compared to wealth, it was more important to be trusted by the core figures of the 6 major corporations at the same time. A force that could be accepted by everyone at the same time would either be above everyone else, or would be considered harmless by everyone else. Being harmless also meant being neutral. Chang'an Club was the largest neutral club. In the past 10 years, it had belonged to the Han family, the largest neutral wealthy family in Jianghu state. The moment Li Tianlan signed his name, this place also belonged to Li Tianlan. In other words, part of it belonged to Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan got some shares here. Not much, just 5%. However, this kind of shares with almost no dividends was meaningless in terms of wealth. Being able to access the club's intelligence as a shareholder was the real priceless thing. In addition to the 5% shares of the Chang'an Club, Li Tianlan also received nearly 8 billion in investment, and the detailed investment plan of the Flourishing Age Fund in the future. But he paid very little for it, or it could be said to be a lot. 20% of the future interests of the East Emperor Palace. This price could be said to be heavy or light. What he bet on was the future prospects of the East Emperor Palace and the confidence of both the investor and the invested party. If the East Emperor Palace could not develop in the future or even died young, the investment of the Flourishing Age Fund would undoubtedly be a big loss. But if Li Tianlan really broke through the obstacles and the Li family returned to Jianghu state, or even swept the entire Dark World, the 20% interest of the East Emperor Palace was almost unimaginable. This was the second time that the Flourishing Age Fund had invested in the East Emperor Palace. Even if the shares of the Chang'an Club were not included, the amount of the 2 investments had already reached 10 billion. If the East Emperor Palace developed smoothly, in the follow-up detailed investment plan, the Flourishing Age Fund would provide the East Emperor Palace with no less than 100 billion and some needed help. Of course, the premise of all this was that the East Emperor Palace had a bright future and could continue to grow. At this stage, in terms of funds, the East Emperor Palace, which had a huge investment, had a good starting point. With money, they could naturally lay a big foundation in Tiannan. From the beginning to the development conditions, the East Emperor Palace had already met 20% interests in the future. Li Tianlan didn't think it was a bad deal. The Flourishing Age Fund valued the potential of the East Emperor Palace, and Li Tianlan also valued the Han family's transcendent position in Jianghu state. For some things, the Dongqing clan with a clear position could not come forward, but the Han family might be able to solve them. Li Tianlan put away the contract in front of him and still looked calm. On the eve of his departure for Eastern Europe, it was a happy thing to be able to further cooperate with the Han family. Happy cooperation. Li Tianlan nodded and said. Opposite him, Han Donglu, the patriarch of the Han family, coughed and said with a smile, "When will we leave?" "Everything is settled. If there are no accidents, we will leave tonight," Li Tianlan said lightly. In order to finalize the investment, Han Donglu personally flew from Huiting to Yuzhou to meet him. Not to mention his sincerity, the other party dared to pay before the end of the chaos in Eastern Europe. Even Li Tianlan had to admit Han Donglu's courage in investment. "You should have waited." Li Tianlan lit a cigarette and took a drag. "After I came back from Eastern Europe, wouldn't it be safer for you to invest?" "Safer?" Han Donglu couldn't help laughing. "If I pursued stability, I would be in the industry. How can there be absolute stability in the industry I am in?" "In the industry we are in, no matter how cautious we are in advance, how comprehensive the analysis is, and how well prepared we are, once we start, it looks like a gamble." "How can there be stability? What I want is profit, not stability. Of course, if you tell me that when you come back from Eastern Europe, I can still get 20% of the East Emperor Palace's interest with my current investment quota, then I will definitely wait. The question is, do you agree?" "Of course not." Li Tianlan laughed. The current situation was unclear, and the risk of the trip to Eastern Europe was huge. At this time, if Han Donglu paid for 20% of the East Emperor Palace's interest, no one would suffer a loss. But if Li Tianlan didn't die in Eastern Europe and returned victorious, then both Li Tianlan and the East Emperor Palace would have a different value. Li Tianlan could still take out 20% of the shares, but if Han Donglu wanted to hold it in his hand, it would be at a different price. So after my team's analysis, we agreed that investing in the East Emperor Palace is the best choice. I know the current situation. You have a good set of cards in your hand. If you play them well, you may win. If I invest now, as long as you can come back alive, I will make a profit. If you die, I will just lose an investment. Although the amount will be large, there will also be an opportunity in Jianghu state at that time. I can get back the loss with interest. Han Dongluo's eyes were clear and frank. Looking at Li Tianlan's eyes that suddenly sharpened, he smiled and shook his head. Don't look at me like that. I'm just telling the truth, although it's not pleasant to hear. Tell me something you like to hear. Since I chose to invest at this time, I have confidence in you. I often tell the elites of the Flourishing Age Fund that you can doubt everything in finance and investment, but you can't doubt your own vision and confidence the most. Doubt will lead to hesitation. If you hesitate, you will have concerns. The more you hesitate, the more concerns you have. In the end, you will be wishy-washy. 9 out of 10 you will lose money. Tianlan, you have a strong force in your hands now. In the chaos of Eastern Europe, not to mention victory, as long as you are not stupid, you will definitely have a chance to protect yourself. The Flourishing Age Fund's requirement for you is not victory. As long as you come back alive, even if you have no achievements, it will be a victory. Whether it is Old Gu or Tianzong, they pushed you to this position not to prevent you from making achievements, but to make it clear that they want to kill you. If you don't die, when you return to Jianghu state, the East Emperor Palace will definitely have a strong momentum. My investment is equivalent to getting back the cost. You have so many trump cards now. I think it should not be difficult for you to protect yourself. As for the timing of the investment, of course there are risks. It's not that no one has advised me, nor that I am domineering. It's just that the reasons to persuade me are not enough to persuade me to change my mind. You are now facing great difficulties and life and death crises. But the problem is your future path. Before you reach the peak, you will constantly encounter life and death crises all the way. This time you are in danger in Eastern Europe, so I won't invest. But what if you come back? Let's not talk about my loss. After you come back, the Wang family of Beihai and Kunlun City will certainly not let you go. Their means against you will be more and more intense. This time I won't invest. Should I wait for the next time? What if you are in more danger next time? Should I invest or not? Don't you hesitate? I hate hesitation. If I hesitate, there is the possibility of giving up. And I don't like to give up. Many investors have given up some opportunities to strengthen themselves because of hesitation. Of course, more people have avoided failure because of the same hesitation. Facts seem to prove that their vision is right. Because those they gave up because of hesitation at the beginning all failed and lost money later, so they think that their vision is very high and they are complacent. But in my opinion, those are all idiots. They didn't invest. In the end, they saw the failure of a project and were glad that they avoided losses. But they didn't think that if they had participated in the investment, maybe a project wouldn't have failed. Instead, they would have seen more opportunities. What is the peak? After all, it is false to reach the peak by one's own strength. Even fairy tales dare not write it like this. The real peak has always been reached by a group of people supporting each other. Tianlan, you and I are cooperating now. Before your potential disappears, you don't have to worry about my sincerity. I am very interested in the 20% interest of the East Emperor Palace in the future. At present, there is no bargaining chip that can make me lose this interest. Some people in Jianghu State have already said that you are the chosen one. With your current achievements, you deserve the title of the chosen one. If one day you become a real chosen one, I can't imagine how much your power will expand. For example, the Wang family of Beihai, their ancestors used to be the chosen one. After hundreds of years and 9 consecutive generations, they can still be regarded as the strongest force in the dark world. I also can't imagine their expansion and status at their peak. If you reach that height in the future, the 20% interest of the East Emperor Palace may be 3 Flourishing Age Funds, 5, or even 10 Flourishing Age Funds. With such great interest and enough hope, of course, I am willing to support you. Not only me, but many people are willing to support you. But it is the most correct for you to choose me and I to choose you. In Jianghu State, in terms of economic strength, especially cash, even the Wang family of Beihai dare not easily say that they are stronger than me. The Flourishing Age Fund is rich and crazy enough. If you can prove your value, I dare to pay for your value. If you don't invest now and hesitate, When you reach the peak or near the peak, the investment will be meaningless. At that time, you probably won't release 2% of the shares, let alone 20%. He paused, looked at the calm and peaceful Li Tianlan, and said with a smile, and even if my investment fails, the Han family's foundation is there. Even if Kunlun City and the Wang family of Beihai have 3 heads and 6 arms, can they tear me apart? I am not as strong as them, but I have cooperation with them. If the Flourishing Age Fund suddenly collapses, not to mention me, they will first suffer a heavy loss. Li Tianlan was silent for a long time. Han Donglu, who always said one thing and did not talk nonsense, also looked at Li Tianlan for a long time. His eyes were playful, thoughtful, and expectant. He had seen Li Tianlan a few days ago in the Sky Academy. Today, when he saw him again, Li Tianlan gave him a completely different feeling. That was not a completely different person after the transformation of power. But at this time, compared with a few days ago, Li Tianlan had an attitude that he had never had before. A few days ago, Li Tianlan was sharp and indifferent. But no matter what he did, he seemed to be drifting with the current, as if he had no clear goal and starting point, so he had no pursuit. But now, Li Tianlan had changed. He was still himself. What changed was his attitude. His eyes would often flash with a light similar to that of contemplation. That was not thinking. It was pursuit. This young man, who was only 22 years old, was now at the forefront of Jianghu state for the first time. At this time, he seemed to be doing his best to pursue. He was looking for his position. Han Donglu laughed. Tianlan, even if you don't believe in my sincerity, you shouldn't doubt your ability. You are the chosen one. Your 20% interest in the future has a fatal attraction for anyone. There are not many people in Jianghu state who can fully support you, but you can always find some. Except for some forces of the Dongqing clan and the Li family, there is only me who has the guts and position to support you. As if thinking of something, Han Donglu's voice was a little gentle. I didn't doubt it. Li Tianlan said. He had investigated a lot of information about the Han family through the curtain in Huiting, and it was very detailed. With enough knowledge, he had never doubted Han Donglu. Because he did not doubt himself. He firmly believed that he would be invincible in the world and sweep the entire dark world. Naturally, he could also realize what the 20% interest of East Emperor Palace meant in the future. Just as Han Donglu had said, it might be 3 or 5. Or even more than the sum of the Flourishing Age Fund. The Flourishing Age Fund was huge. That was one of the most powerful financial giants in the world. In terms of the scale of the Flourishing Age Fund, their development had actually reached a bottleneck, or the ceiling of their current business model. Next, unless Han Donglu could directly control, rather than simply influence, the financial order of a country, a state, or even the world, it would be difficult for them to make a breakthrough. This was Han Donglu's peak. And after the peak, it was naturally downhill. So the Han family and the Flourishing Age Fund had reached the juncture of seeking change. Li Tianlan's appearance was undoubtedly an opportunity for them to seek change. As Han Donglu himself said, as long as Li Tianlan could guarantee his strength, his sincerity could be completely trusted. Li Tianlan was very sure of this, because it meant that in the future, the Flourishing Age Fund would have a much larger harvest. And this understanding until a long time later, when he really realized what the Flourishing Age Fund meant, he found how absurd his original understanding was. Happy cooperation, Boss Han. Li Tianlan took the initiative to reach out and hold Han Donglu's palm. Han Donglu personally poured a cup of iced tea for Li Tianlan and raised his glass with a smile. To our future. The teacups clinked together. The conversation between the two sides seemed to have become more relaxed. Has the list of the Snow Dance Corps been determined? Han Donglu asked. The transfer order has just been issued. There is a meeting at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. After the meeting, I will go directly to Im. Li Tianlan said thoughtfully. The high-level list of the Snow Dance Corps was officially determined last night, and it was confirmed that Li Tianlan, the commander of the Snow Dance Corps, had the power to fine-tune the division of labor of the Snow Dance Corps according to the situation in Eastern Europe. The total number of people in the Snow Dance Corps was 19,832. It was composed of dozens of departments such as the Border Control Corps, Sai City, Jade Pool, Mount Shu, Shadow Sting Army, Beihai Corps, Kunlun City, Oriental Excalibur, Totem, Divine Light, Zhongzhou State Special Operations Brigade, Shadow Sect, azure path, butterfly, and so on. It had a huge span, from the military to the special warfare system, to the special forces, to the martial arts forces. The commander of the army was Li Tianlan, and he was awarded the rank of marshal. Chen Qingwan of the Beihai Corps was appointed as the vice-marshal of the Snowdance Corps, and he was awarded the rank of general. Gu Tiankong, the pavilion master of Wind Snow School of Kunlun City, was appointed as the inspector of the Snowdance Corps, and he was awarded the rank of general. Cool Breeze of Sai City, Drifting Cloud, was appointed as the deputy marshal, and he was awarded the rank of lieutenant general. Hua Qingfeng, the master of the Shadow Sect, was the chief of staff, with the same rank as the deputy commander. The two major generals of the Border Control Corps, Li Zhonghu and Sun Mengran, were transferred to the Snowdance Corps and served as the two division commanders. The swordsmen of Jade Pool and Mount Shu formed an assassination group, codenamed Secret Sword. All the lists were officially formed and fully respected Li Tianlan's will. Li Tianlan had been paying attention to the desert. After Li Huaqing personally intervened, Fireman had walked out of the desert prison and would probably arrive in Yuzhou tonight. When this force entered Eastern Europe, it was bound to form a frenzy to attack the superpowers. Knights Templars and the Jiang family of South America would bear the brunt. Li Tianlan narrowed his eyes, thinking about his duties and the oath he made to the sea in the final battle of Heaven Capital more than 3 years ago. He would destroy the Jiang family of South America in his lifetime. He didn't know if the Jiang family of South America had forgotten that sentence. But the sea would not forget it. He would not forget it, either. I have a question. Li Tianlan took a sip of tea and suddenly said, Go ahead. Han Donglu smiled. Is it related to the Snowdance Corps? No, it's a personal question. I just want to satisfy my curiosity. Li Tianlan smiled. In the past few days, he had asked a lot of people a question. Dongqing Wudi, Bai Zhanfeng, Li Zhonghu, Li Honghe, and Qin Weibai. Even when he met with the senior leaders of the Snowdance Corps, he also asked Yun Qinshi, Han Chongyang, and Cool Breeze and Drifting Cloud. But he never got the answer. Some people really didn't know. But there were also some people who knew the answer but didn't tell him. But the answer was always there. Before the expedition, looking at the biggest financial tycoon in the country in front of him, Li Tianlan's heart moved. Out of curiosity, he once again asked the question that he thought had nothing to do with him before, but now he had been thinking about it. Boss Han, do you have any information on Jianghu State in recent decades? Which top masters prefer to keep dogs? This question was really boring and extremely gossipy in the eyes of people who didn't know the inside story. Han Donglu was a little stunned. There was a strange flash in his eyes, and then he smiled. Top masters who keep dogs, but I know there is one. Li Tianlan's eyes lit up. Han Donglu's flourishing age fund was huge, but strictly speaking, it was a new force. Li Tianlan didn't expect to get an answer from Han Donglu, but the reality gave him a surprise. Boss Han, who are you talking about? Li Tianlan smiled. Han Donglu gave him a strange look. Top master who keeps dogs. Isn't it you? I heard you have a golden retriever. Li Tianlan looked at Han Donglu and suddenly had nothing to say. He was a top master in recent decades. Even in recent centuries, with the combat capability of the invincible realm, he could be regarded as a top master in Jianghu State. But Li Tianlan didn't ask about himself. He asked about Dongqing Huangtu. But this name seemed to be a taboo in Jianghu State, so Li Tianlan could only use everything he knew to find clues about Dongqing Huangtu. But the information he knew about Dongqing Huangtu was too little. Pitifully little. He knew that Dongqing had a dog. He also knew. Li Tianlan suddenly thought of something and said, Boss Han, do you know about the killers in the dark world? I'm talking about the killers of the invincible realm. If Dongqing Huangtu was a taboo, the siege back then was destined to be unknown. But the killer of the invincible realm was a clue. When Qin Weibai talked about Dongqing Huangtu, she once said that in Huating, Dongqing Huangtu had killed the only killer of the invincible realm in the dark world with one move. The invincible realm killed the invincible realm. Just one move. The killer of the invincible realm. Han Donglu frowned. There are relatively few killers of the invincible realm. Killers seldom pay attention to frontal combat. It is said that they are weak in willpower, so it is difficult to break through to the invincible realm. Now, in the dark world, It seems that only Tribulation of Sai City is an invincible realm killer. There was one 3 years ago, codenamed Evil, but you killed him. What about before? Li Tianlan asked. Did anyone die in Huiting? Died in Huiting? Han Donglu looked at Li Tianlan blankly. He suddenly raised his eyebrows. You mean Ghost Moon? Who is Ghost Moon? Li Tianlan asked. That was many years ago. It seems that there was indeed an invincible realm killer called Ghost Moon at that time. I don't pay much attention to this. Wait a minute. As Han Donglu said this, he suddenly raised his eyebrows and shouted at the door. Ayo Han! The door of the box was pushed open. A middle-aged man in a black suit and sunglasses, a standard bodyguard outfit, came in. He said respectfully, Boss, this is my bodyguard. Han Donglu introduced him with a smile and asked directly, I seem to have heard you talk about Ghost Moon before. It seems that you said it? This is His Highness Li Tianlan. He is more interested in this matter. Ghost Moon? Ao Han muttered to himself, looked at Li Tianlan and said with a wry smile, Your Highness, he has been dead for many years. He died in Huiting? Li Tianlan asked. Yes. Ao Han nodded. It was in Huiting Airport. It has been more than 20 years. I was still in Huiting Special Operations Bureau. At that time, Ghost Moon sneaked into Huiting. I don't know what he wanted to do. Jianghu State got the news and sent us to the airport to search. And then? Li Tianlan asked calmly. Ao Han glanced at Li Tianlan. Then he was killed. His eyes were strange and fanatical. He seemed to be a witness of the battle that year. Even after many years, he still had a deep impression of that battle. Li Tianlan subconsciously sat up straight and said calmly, Who killed him? Ao Han wanted to say something but stopped. He looked at Han Donglu and then at Li Tianlan, frowning slightly. Just tell the truth. Han Donglu seemed to think of something, and seemed to understand what Li Tianlan was investigating. It's Marshal Li. Ao Han glanced at Li Tianlan and said with a wry smile. Your Highness, it was your father Li Guangtu, who killed Ghost Moon at the airport. One sword strike. Yu Zhou was in a turbulent situation. When the list of the Snow Dance Corps was confirmed, the final maneuver of the two academies was still going on in the Sky Academy. This was already the 7th day of the maneuver. The maneuver was approaching the second half. In the ward of the Sky Academy, several members of the East Emperor Palace were bored to death watching the TV broadcast in the ward. They were a little bored. The maneuver of the two academies this time was actually very exciting. But perhaps because the first day was too shocking, the subsequent wonderful maneuver suddenly lost a lot of its appeal. Not to mention the few people from the East Emperor Palace, in recent days, even the number of people who came to watch the ceremony had decreased a lot. Such a scene inevitably gave people the impression that this final maneuver was the most valuable, but also the least valuable. It's boring. Li Beitian sat on the bed and ate an apple. He looked at the TV screen dully and suddenly said, Tianlan is going to Eastern Europe tonight. It's too urgent. Give me another 2 months, no, a month and a half. Damn it, in a month, my injury will be better. If I go to Eastern Europe at that time, do you think I can be a general? Do you think generals are cabbages? Or the general of the Special Warfare Battalion, who can carry a general star on his shoulder in the Snow Dance Corps? At least they are at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm. You can only be a field officer if you go there. Ning Chenqing said disdainfully. Li Beitian cursed, then suddenly laughed and said, A field officer is not a small position. At least I'm a real thunder-shocking realm martial artist, so I should at least be a colonel. Brother Tough, you're different. If you go there, can you be a lieutenant? Tut-tut. As an expert a half-step to the thunder-shocking realm, you can definitely be a lieutenant. He saluted Ning Chenqing and said seriously, Hello, Captain Ning. Get lost. Ning Chenqing scolded him rudely. Li Beitian did not refute. He was silent for a while, then shook his head. He muttered to himself, Damn it. It was more of a self-deprecation than a tease between the two. In the Snow Dance Corps, the generals were at least at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm. They were a field officer and a lieutenant. Not to mention being injured, even in their heyday, they could not play a big role. It was better than nothing. However, the commander of such an elite corps, the youngest marshal of the special warfare system, was their brother. The huge gap between them not only brought about disappointment, but also confusion and confusion. I suddenly feel that it's meaningless to stay in the Sky Academy. Li Beitian said in a self-deprecating tone. I'll graduate soon. I can't stay even if I want to. Ning Qianqing's tone was flat. The ward fell silent again. Yu Qingyan, who had considered marrying Ning Qianqing, sat beside him and held his hand. I'll go to Eastern Europe. In front of the window of the ward, Su Chu's tall figure almost blocked the sunlight outside. He suddenly turned around and said. The sun shone on his back, and his expression was a little vague. My injuries shouldn't be too big of a problem. I can recover slowly. I'll go to Eastern Europe, at least to help young master. Su Chu said. Although his strength had not reached the peak of the thunder-shocking realm, he was a thunder-shocking realm expert with Thunder Vein, so he could not be underestimated. Su Chu did not care about his position. It was also good to follow Li Tianlan and be a bodyguard. What? Li Tianlan suddenly raised his eyebrows. If you go to Eastern Europe, then of course we also. Let's go to Tiannan. A haggard but still pleasant voice suddenly sounded outside the ward. They turned around at the same time. Yu Qingyan cheered, stood up, and said with a smile, Sister Yuetong. It was Wang Yuetong who appeared outside the ward. After walking out of Mount Dibing and giving up the identity of a princess, she did not go to Yuzhou to find Li Tianlan, but went directly to the Sky Academy. So far, she had not even called Li Tianlan. Wang Yuetong's face was a little pale, and her beautiful big eyes were a little red and swollen. It seemed that she had cried not long ago. But at this moment, without the identity of a little princess, there was a touch of strength in her eyes. She took Yu Qingyan's hand and shook it hard. Yuetong. Li Beitian looked at her in surprise. You didn't go to Yuzhou to find Tianlan? What can I do with Tianlan? Wang Yuetong's eyes were a little blank. She chuckled and said, with my current strength, if I go to Yuzhou, can I follow him to Eastern Europe? If I go now, I will even be a burden, not to mention help. Ning Qianqing frowned and did not speak. So, Wang Yuetong whispered, go to Tiannan. It will become the most important foundation of Tianlan in the future. You are his brothers, and now you are all looking for your own value. I am his woman, and I also need to find my own value. She looked at Li Beitian and Ning Qianqing. Our value may be in Tiannan. Tianlan goes to Eastern Europe to deal with the chaos. It is good for us to go to Tiannan first to lay the foundation. Li Tianlan, Wang Yuetong, Ning Qianqing, Li Beitian. All of them were very young. At the age when they could squander their youth, every young person seemed to be confused. They were looking for their own value in confusion. Li Tianlan was also looking for his own direction in confusion. They were all so resolute and so duty-bound. Therefore, some very important things were determined in just a few words. There was no hesitation or hesitation. So there was no worry. It was the afternoon of August 6th in Jianghu State. The list of the Jianghu State Snowdance Corps was formed. Li Tianlan, the youngest marshal in the special warfare system of Jianghu State, led the team north. And the most important team around him, led by Wang Yuetong, began to go south. The light shone down from the sky, and the sun turned into moonlight, bright and clear, as always. In fact, any beginning that was crowned as great by later generations was just ordinary when things happened at that time. Chapter 408. The glaring fire burned the night sky, and shrill screams spread out in the night. There were flashing police lights on both sides of the road, and dense figures were everywhere. The firemen were busy putting out the flames. Black smoke billowed up. The luxurious and exquisite manor in the past had become ruins. Bloody corpses were scattered randomly on the ground and were carried away by doctors and nurses in white. In the cold and murderous atmosphere, Jiang Chenyan, a master on the holy list with the code name Black Hand in the Dark World, looked at the scene with a gloomy face and did not speak for a long time. The fat policeman stood beside Jiang Chenyan with a serious face and kept asking questions. A large number of weapons, even a lot of heavy weapons, were found in the ruined manor, and the assailant attacked the place with the fastest speed and the most violent means. Everything was short. It was hard to say whether it was a battle or a massacre. In less than 3 minutes, dense gunshots boiled in the night, and the roar of bombs rang through half of the city. Blood spurted out in the chaos. One by one, the elites of the Jiang family of South America were destroyed and torn apart by absolute violence. When the fire rose into the sky, the battle was over. This scene suddenly made the local police feel like they were facing a formidable enemy. Coming to the manor with the police were the middle-level heads of the National Security Department. They were standing in front of Jiang Chenyan and asking him all the questions they thought could lead to clues. For example, the origin of the weapons in the manor. For example, the motive of the Jiang family of South America to stay here. For example, whether Jiang Chenyan had offended anyone. Maybe it was the Snow Country Mafia who raided the manor. Jiang Chenyan frowned tightly. His body was no longer trembling, but the irritation and disgust between his eyebrows could not be concealed. Finally, when the fat police chief proposed that Jiang Chenyan must give an explanation, Jiang Chenyan could not bear it any longer. He pulled his fat body over and kicked the middle-level official of the National Security Department away. "Don't mess with me, fat pig. I'm a guest here, not a prisoner. I hope you know your duties." Jiang Chenyan held back his killing intent, slowly put down the policeman and said coldly, "Now take your men and get out." All the policemen nearby were in an uproar. The director, who was no longer young, coughed a few times with difficulty. Just as he was about to order the thugs in front of him to be arrested with a furious face, a group of mysterious people in black suits had entered the scene. There were a total of 8 men in black suits surrounding a middle-aged man in sportswear. The middle-aged man glanced at the embarrassed police chief, frowned slightly, and waved his hand casually. The police chief, who was considered a powerful figure in the city, didn't dare to say a word. He couldn't care less about his dignity. He smiled apologetically and began to retreat. At the same time, he took all the policemen nearby with him. "I'm sorry." The middle-aged man walked up to Jiang Chenyan and touched his big nose helplessly. "It happened so suddenly that I couldn't help here. Mr. Jiang, I hope we can get your understanding." Jiang Chenyan managed to control his expression. His eyes softened a little, and he said calmly, "It doesn't matter. It's just a pity to destroy the manor you like, Mr. Rekvia. I will compensate you for your loss." Rekvia is not a name. In Eastern Europe, it was an absolutely prominent surname, representing a top wealthy family in Eastern Europe. Perhaps in the whole of Europe, the Rekvia family was not as powerful as the Morton family and the Violet family. But at least in the land of Eastern Europe, Rekvia's authority would not be worse than anyone else's. It was the largest and even the only wealthy family in Wulan State. In Wulan State, the second largest country in Europe, Rekvia was almost synonymous with supremacy. After the collapse of the Polar Ground Alliance, the superpowers of the Dark World entered Eastern Europe one after another. Some found partners on the spot after entering Eastern Europe. Some dark forces already had partners before they entered Eastern Europe. The Rekvia family was the most powerful ally of the Jiang family of South America in Eastern Europe. Therefore, a considerable part of the elites of the Jiang family of South America were concentrated in Wulan State. There were nearly 800 elites in Reki City, the capital of Wulan State alone. This manor was the place provided by the Rekvia family to the Jiang family of South America to settle their own people. Nearly 200 elites all lived here. This group of people just entered Wulan State 2 days ago. They didn't even play their strength in the chaos of Eastern Europe. Because of the raid tonight, they were all wiped out. The most important thing was, within the Jiang family of South America, these 200 people were the direct descendants of Jiang Chenyan. "It's just a property. It's nothing." The current patriarch of the Rekvia family smiled calmly, then narrowed his eyes and said, "It's just that I'm curious about who dares to come to Reki City to be the enemy of the Rekvia family. Mr. Jiang, do you have any clues?" This raid seemed to be a coincidence and deliberate. Jiang Chenyan was supposed to go to the Rekvia family's dinner today, but when he was still on the way, the manor was attacked. What was more embarrassing was that Jiang Chenyan set off from here to attend the dinner. When the attack happened, Jiang Chenyan had just left here for less than 20 minutes. "It's people from Jianghu State." Jiang Chenyan gritted his teeth and said with cold eyes, "Sai City." Sai City was a world-famous city of assassins. The way of assassins was not always deceitful. Especially for the strong, the top assassins were as calm and domineering as anyone else. When Tribulation drove out of Reki City, Situ Tsangyue had been standing at their original place and waiting for a long time. In the thick night, she was dressed in a white dress, and her long hair was blown by the wind. In a trance, she was like a shadow. Tribulation parked the car beside her. Situ Tsangyue sat in the car and was silent. The car started again. In the car, which was neither fast nor slow, Tribulation suddenly coughed violently. The cough was dull and hoarse. The frequency was not fast, but it was deep, as if it was heart-wrenching. "I'll drive," Situ Tsangyue said. Tribulation shook his head, waved his hand and reluctantly said, "No need." He coughed for a while, straightened up, wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth, and was silent for a long time. "There was an accident tonight." After a long time, Tribulation said softly. Situ Tsangyue, who had been looking at her brother's face, said nothing more. Tonight, the division of labor between the two was very clear. Situ Tsangyue's goal was a manor in the south of Reki City, while Tribulation's goal was a club in the north of the city. Situ Tsangyue's move of useless heaven and earth almost completely wiped out the entire manor. After completing the task, she waited for a long time before seeing Tribulation come. Needless to say, she knew that there was an accident tonight. "Can you control your injuries or not?" Situ Tsangyue asked, frowning tightly. Tribulation was the only invincible realm killer in the dark world today. Many people knew about this. But few people knew that since he broke through in Heaven Capital, Tribulation's injury had never healed. From the chi-controlling realm to the ice-condensing realm, fire-flaming realm, thunder-shocking realm, and straight into the invincible realm, this road of martial arts was steep and fierce to the extreme. Tribulation proved the feasibility of this road and its strength. Tribulation was very strong now. He had reached the end of this road. If he didn't care about his injury, Tribulation's real combat capability would be far better than Situ Tsangyue's. It was entirely possible for him to be ranked in the top 10 of the Divine List, or even close to the top 5 of the Divine List. Not to mention the top 5 of the Divine List. As long as he entered the Divine List, Tribulation could be regarded as the only invincible realm killer in the dark world in the past 100 years to enter the Divine List. But Tribulation's breakthrough was too intense, and the injury left was so serious that it could hardly be healed. It had been more than 3 years since the final battle of Heaven Capital, but Tribulation, who had terrifying combat capability, had not succeeded in stabilizing his realm. His realm went up and down, and sometimes it would fall from the invincible realm. Not to mention his own feelings, Situ Tsangyue, as his elder sister, was frightened. Tribulation was indeed very strong now, but the strength he could exert now was at most equivalent to the strength before he broke through, or even slightly worse. His injury and body had completely limited his strength. Such a breakthrough was even worse than not breaking through at all. "There is still a chance," Tribulation said blandly. "The Jade Seal is still in my hands." "The Jade Seal, the Jade Seal," Situ Tsangyue sneered and said. "Without the Jade Seal that Tianlong gave you, it is unknown whether you can live until now. Judging from your current injury, the Jade Seal can only save your life at most." Tribulation fell silent. "I'll think about it." After a long time, he slowly opened his mouth. "It's time to make up your mind. At your current age, you still have a chance," Situ Tsangyue said. Tribulation did not speak. He knew what it meant to make up his mind. His current problem was difficult to solve, but in essence it was actually very simple. The power of the invincible realm was very strong. But he went straight from the chi-controlling realm to the invincible realm. This kind of breakthrough was too intense. Although he was lucky to succeed, the huge power of the invincible realm had almost crushed Tribulation's body. Simply speaking, his current body, because of the injury, could not bear the power of the invincible realm at all. And as long as this power was still there, his injury could not be healed. This matter was difficult to solve, or it was difficult to solve it perfectly. At present, the only possibility was that Tribulation chose to lower his realm by himself. If this word was used on other people, it might be barely acceptable. But how cruel it was to be used on Tribulation. Other invincible realm experts would at least be a half-step invincible realm expert if they lowered their realm. If Tribulation chose to leave the invincible realm, he did not enter the ice-condensing realm, the fire-flaming realm, or the thunder-shocking realm. Once he lowered his realm, he would be in the chi-controlling realm. Who could accept this fact? In any case, I have to delay the final battle in Snow Country. Tribulation said softly. Before the final battle, I'll try to do as little as possible. In my current state, there are not many opportunities for me to take action. I'll try to use them at the critical moment. Situ Tsungyue said, yes, we did our duty to deal with the Jiang family of South America tonight and give Zhongzhou State an explanation. What's your plan next? Do it according to the original plan. Tribulation said, go to Snow Country. Situ Tsungyue glanced at him. Tribulation seemed to realize something and changed his words. Go to Mormons and meet her. Mormons was a city in Snow Country. To go to Mormons was to go to Snow Country. But Tribulation's tone was calm, as if he was emphasizing something. Don't you want to have a look? Situ Tsungyue was silent for a while and suddenly asked. Tribulation's eyes calmly looked straight at the road ahead in the night. The scenery on both sides of the road quickly went backward in the advance of the vehicles. The car kept speeding up. Tribulation's voice was calm and without any fluctuation. What's there to see? If you want to see, it's naturally good. I don't want to see. Don't want to see? I don't want to see. There was a sudden silence in the car. Only the sound of the engine was roaring. In just a few words, the car had unconsciously reached its limit in Tribulation's hands. She has helped you a lot. Situ Tsungyue said calmly. When you went up from the Qi controlling realm, you encountered a lot of problems. If she hadn't helped you solve the most critical problem, you might have been stuck there. I saved her life. Tribulation said briefly. That was her reward for me. That was the only mission you failed. If you hadn't fallen in love with her, how could you have given up the mission to save her? Situ Tsungyue chuckled. The corners of Tribulation's mouth twitched slightly, and his eyes were cold and hard. Go and have a look. Situ Tsungyue expressed her position. I want to have a look too. I don't want to see it. Tribulation suddenly smiled. It's meaningless. She is not her. There's no need to see it. She is not her. Situ Tsungyue's eyes were a little dazed. Well, he is not him. She and him. We're not him. If we can see each other again. Situ Tsungyue laughed at herself. If we can see each other again, it would be best if we are not enemies. Tribulation whispered. This sentence was very clear. Because it was clear it was cruel. It would be best if they were not enemies. If there were enemies who could not distinguish life and death, what was the meaning of the word best? Tribulation looked ahead. His eyes were dazed and calm. Trance and calmness were constantly alternating. The corners of his mouth were raised, and his smile was a little complicated. You are not reconciled. Situ Tsungyue said calmly. So what if I am not reconciled? Tribulation whispered. When she was still a holy punishment priest, I couldn't take her away. What can I do now? In fact, I understood that I had the power to take her away, but I didn't have that kind of will. She wouldn't go with me. I'm an assassin, and she's a priest. Now I'm a highness among killers, and she's the Holy Virgin of the Vatican. When we parted that year, we knew very well that she could only be the Holy Virgin and would never be Mrs. Situ. So in the darkness of that year, the young man named Situ Xianxia was most thoroughly immersed in the killing of the dark shadow. He became a pure tribulation. Whether willing or not, there would be many firsts in life. Many firsts might be against one's will, but strictly speaking, it was not difficult. Because there was no choice. But it was the most difficult to repeat life without choice. The afterglow of the polar sun was getting dimmer. Under the soft sunlight, Lishi stood in front of the window of the Jelly Country Hotel, looking at the bustling scene outside, and her eyes became more and more dull. She was afraid of the repetition of fate and choices. But the purpose of her trip was to repeat. She repeatedly killed one person, killed two people. She repeatedly killed people she didn't want to kill. She repeatedly killed people she had killed but didn't kill. This feeling was very torturous. But after suffering became a habit, it became numb and ignorant coldness and exhaustion. Exhaustion became eagerness. She wanted to end all eagerness. As long as it was over. No matter how it ended, it didn't matter. As long as it was over. In the sunny night, Lishi turned around and took out her mobile phone to make a call. The phone was quickly connected. A calm and cautious voice sounded. Hello. This is Lishi. Li Shi held the phone and spoke in a brief tone. There was a long silence on the other end of the phone. Li Shi had been silent for so long that everyone outside Kunlun City seemed to have forgotten her existence. After a long time, the voice on the phone sounded again. "Hello, madam, where are you now?" "I'm at the Oga Hotel. I like it here very much. You don't have to pick me up," Li Shi said calmly. The man on the phone was silent again for a while, and then whispered, "Okay, madam." Li Shi held the phone quietly and was silent for a long time before she said flatly, "Is there any news from the Purgatory of Heaven capital? We are currently investigating, but it is certain that Daybreak of the Purgatory of Heaven capital has entered Eastern Europe, but we are still unable to determine deity's whereabouts." On the phone, the man's voice was cautious. "Keep investigating," Li Shi said lightly. "In the chaos of Eastern Europe, the only thing you need to do is to determine the whereabouts of deity of the Purgatory of Heaven capital." "Okay," the man responded calmly. Li Shi hung up the phone in silence and sat on the bed. The bed was very soft. However, an even more obvious fatigue engulfed her like a tide, bringing with it a suffocating sense of oppression. Li Shi closed her eyes and fell on the bed. She didn't want to be sorry to the Li family. But in the end, she stabbed him in the heart and the key point of the entire Li family. She didn't want to help Gu Xingyun now. But because of Li Qingqing, she had to come to Eastern Europe. She had been silent for most of her life. But when she needed to do something, fate would always push her body and push her in the opposite direction of her will. She had long been tired of such a life and spurned the world. So this time, she obeyed Gu Xingyun's orders, but she did not intend to completely obey Gu Xingyun's orders. The sky in Kunlun City was too cold. Gu Xingyun's face was too disgusting. In the icy and snowy Eastern Europe, she really had the idea to end all this. She couldn't resist Gu Xingyun. But she didn't intend to fight for the interests of Kunlun City in Eastern Europe. In this cold but quiet place, if she could drag the man who she didn't know was called deity or Li Guangtu to go with her. For her, that was the best ending. Eastern Europe. Time. At 2 o'clock in the middle of the night, a flight from Jianghu State to Snow Country landed smoothly at the capital airport after a connecting flight from Snow Country to Im. The capital airport had been completely under martial law a day ago. All flights had stopped operating. The martial law had lasted from the early morning of the previous day to the present. The entire Im officials seemed to be quietly waiting for the landing of the special plane. Lieutenant General Chang Huaining, the new commander of the Arctic Ocean Command of Jianghu State, stood in the airport in a military uniform. He stood tall and straight and was calm and composed, surrounded by a group of senior officials of Im. The Im officials attached great importance to the pickup. Not only did they agree that the order of the airport would be maintained by the Jianghu State garrison, but they also sent Im's Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Affairs Minister, Trace, to lead a large team that was comparable to the Foreign Investigation Team to meet them in person. The huge plane was taxiing on the runway, and the roar was getting closer and closer. Cheng Huaining glanced at the plane, glanced at Im's Foreign Affairs Minister Trace beside him, and said with a smile, "His Highness, they are transferring from Snow Country. There are some problems in Snow Country, which delayed some time. Mr. Prime Minister, if there is no accident this time, when His Highness goes back, maybe Jianghu State will consider establishing a direct route from Jianghu State to Im. At that time, please support us, Mr. Prime Minister." A direct route from Jianghu State to Im. Terence was stunned, and then he was ecstatic. He nodded and said, of course, I will support it. General Cheng, I personally yearn for Jianghu State. I am also willing to urge the government to strengthen the bilateral relationship between Im and Jianghu State. Cheng Huaining nodded with a smile. Once the direct route from Jianghu State to Im was established, Jianghu State would benefit, but the government of Im would benefit the most. Im had no reason not to agree. The support he mentioned was undoubtedly not the support of the route, but the position and performance of Im in the chaos in Eastern Europe. Some time ago, the president of Im personally met Jiang Chenyan of the Jiang family of South America. Now, although he was still friendly to Jianghu State, people with discerning eyes could see that his attitude had gradually wavered. Cheng Huaining had just arrived at the Arctic Ocean Command, so he naturally did not want to see this happen. Im was one of the garrisons of the Arctic Ocean Command. If he switched sides to the Jiang family of South America, it would not only be trouble for him, but also lose his face. The plane slowly stopped. The cabin opened. The gangway was lowered. In the silence, one after another, officers of the special warfare system of Jianghu state in military uniforms got off the plane. The dark green military uniforms occupied the vision of a large number of senior officials of IM. Cheng Huaining subconsciously straightened his body. A large number of senior officials from both military and political sides of IM also widened their eyes. They all knew a name. That name now meant the strongest among the younger generation in the dark world. Everyone wanted to see the demeanor of the young chosen one. Officers appeared one after another. Some were tough, some were quiet, some were calm, and some were wild. Terence, the official leader of IM, was dazzled. A young man in the same military uniform finally came out of the cabin. Terence glanced at him casually and ignored him. He was still looking for the legendary young marshal of Jianghu state. Cheng Huaining straightened his body at the first time. Salute! Near the airport, all the garrison troops of Jianghu state stood at attention and saluted at the same time. Lieutenant General Cheng Huaining of the Arctic Ocean Command of Jianghu state pays respect to your highness. Cheng Huaining's steady and loud voice resounded through the entire airport. Terence was startled, and his eyes subconsciously shifted to the young man. Then he shifted. Then he shifted back. He was a young man who couldn't be any more ordinary. Although the marshal's military uniform was very conspicuous, but it always made people unable to help but ignore his existence. He was standing there clearly, but it gave people the feeling that he didn't notice him at all. The young man slowly went down the gangway and raised his hand to salute back. As he walked, he was like a transparent shadow that was illusory, indistinct, and calm and collected. But the moment he raised his hand, the entire airport suddenly became incomparably real. He stood there quietly and saluted back. But the illusory feeling of being ignored just now completely disappeared. The lights of the airport shone on his military uniform and rank. The light was boundless. General Ning. Li Tianlan put down his arm, held Cheng Huaining's hand, and said with a chuckle, "Thank you for your hard work." It was late at night on August 7th in Eastern Europe. Under the attention of all the dark forces in the world, the Snow Dance Corps of Jianghu state came. The light of the polar sun was getting dimmer and dimmer. The sun was gradually falling. In the manner of Mormons, Qin Wei Bai, who had returned from Bayou State, was wearing a coat and standing quietly at the top of the villa, looking at the flowers blooming all over the manor. The flowers were in full bloom in violation of the season and the temperature. There were thousands of colors and vitality everywhere. Qin Wei Bai looked at them quietly, expressionless. "It's actually very beautiful. Although it's a little messy, it's much better than before." Lin Fengting's voice sounded beside Qin Wei Bai with a smile. "You don't like it? I hate being deceived." Qin Wei Bai said softly. A scapegoat was not a scapegoat. What she left for Li Tianlan was a mortal love. When she returned to the manor and saw the flowers in the garden, Qin Wei Bai already understood what had happened. But Xianxia had gone far away after doing all this. As for the two senior brothers, according to Xianxia, they were all traveling and couldn't be contacted. Thus, this life force was firmly stuck here and could no longer be erased. Only when you are alive can you be qualified to hate something. Lin Fengting said softly, "This is good, really good." "Maybe." Qin Wei Bai took a deep breath and said softly, "Xian Yuan's sword is already on its way to Eastern Europe. In order to avoid attracting attention, they will come in batches. They will all arrive in Mormons in about a week." "What's your arrangement?" Lin Fengting asked. Qin Wei Bai thought for a moment, shook her head slowly and said, "No, just stay here." "Stay here?" Lin Fengting was a little stunned. Qin Wei Bai said yes. The chaos in Eastern Europe. Lin Fengting frowned. In the end of the chaos, there must be a final battle. Qin Wei Bai said softly, "No matter where we fight, the final battle can only be in Mormons, not anywhere else. In the outsider's impression, the Samsara Palace has been destroyed. I will wait for them here and give everyone a surprise." She looked at Lin Fengting. "Sir, you seem to have forgotten that I said this would be the place of the final battle." "Here." Lin Fengting looked at Qin Wei Bai. "What's special here? In the whole of Eastern Europe, this is the most special place." Qin Wei Bai laughed. "Sir, you can think of this as a base set up by the Samsara Palace here. The Samsara Palace owns more than a manor in Mormons, but some things can't be seen until the final battle. Lin Fengting looked at Qin Weibai for a long time before he nodded. I'll wait and see. Qin Weibai didn't speak. She just looked up at the polar sun in the sky. The polar sun slowly sank and finally disappeared completely from sight. There was no day and night in the polar sun. The sun would rise again the moment it set. But today. However, the setting sun did not appear after it set. Before the lights of Mormons came on, the polar sun disappeared. The thick and deep night enveloped the whole world in an instant. A pale green light suddenly lit up in the dark sky, which was as silent as a grave. The light danced in the sky, reflecting the entire night sky with incomparable brilliance. That was the most beautiful spectacle in the world. The polar night aurora. The temperature of Mormons was dropping. The wind was dancing wildly in the darkness. The cold wind blew over and messed up Qin Weibai's long hair that was tied up. She stood quietly, but her hair suddenly flew under the laser, extremely presumptuous. Qin Weibai raised her head and still stared at the night high in the sky. The aurora in the sky kept flickering in her eyes. Only the darkness grew deeper. The everlasting night officially arrived. Chapter 409. In a capitalist country, power could block a lot of things, but it could not block the media. In Europe, perhaps not all media companies had the status of a giant, but any super tycoon would definitely have extraordinary power in the media field. So when a group of middle-level and high-level officers of the Snowdance Corps walked out of IM Airport, the cameras of countless media were flashing. The dark green military uniform that appeared in IM seemed to have become a picture full of power, which was transmitted to all corners of Eastern Europe in the fastest time. Li Tianlan. This name, which had just appeared on the stage of the Dark World, was still strange to most people. Perhaps the deepest impression he left on the Dark World was his decisiveness in breaking into the invincible realm in the decisive Battle of Heaven capital 3 years ago, and his amazing sword in the maneuver of the 2 academies of Jianghu State not long ago. Most people might not know what this young marshal of Jianghu State meant. But without accurate cognition, it did not mean that he would be ignored. A young marshal full of vigor and sharpness at a young age, and an elite special warfare battalion with a luxurious lineup, this force was no less than anyone in Eastern Europe. No one would ignore them, and no one dared to ignore them. The northernmost part of Snow Country had ushered in the polar night. The ink-like darkness enveloped Vasily's cathedral. The lights in the church were almost dazzling and looked particularly brilliant in the night. The polar day and the polar night alternated. The daylight disappeared late at night. Darkness enveloped the morning. When the brilliant aurora in the sky slowly dissipated, the whole world seemed to become dead silent. The Holy Virgin of the Vatican, Angel, stood on the bell tower of the church and watched the light filling the night gradually disappear. She slowly turned around and looked at the TV screen on the indoor wall. Eastern European news was playing on the screen. For all of Eastern Europe, this was a new TV channel. It was a new news channel set up by Daqin International Media in Eastern Europe about a month ago. Daqin International was in Bayou State. However, the Eastern European News Channel gathered the major events of all the countries in Eastern Europe and broadcast them in the news. In the chaotic land full of interests, blood, power and beliefs, the Eastern European News Channel had undoubtedly become a sharp sword in the hands of the Qin family in Bayou country. On the TV screen, the dignified and elegant host was telling about a mysterious attack that took place in Reki City of Wulan State an hour ago. The fire in the live video was still not extinguished. The chaotic lights and the crowd kept moving in the flickering. The doctors and nurses of Reki City kept carrying the bodies onto the stretchers. The beautiful manor had become ruins. The camera kept shaking. Intentionally or unintentionally, Jiang Qianyan's gloomy face and Rekvia's face appeared in the camera for a moment. Angel watched in silence. The presenter's voice in the news was soft and low, with a bit of solemnity and compassion. It sounded emotional, but after listening to it for a long time, it always sounded routine. The scene in the news changed, and the sky above the capital of IM appeared. Compared with the solemnity of Wulan State, IM in the picture was only majestic. The dark green military uniforms and military ranks of Jianghu State appeared on the TV screen, but all of them had the same back view. They were silent, resolute, and had a sense of forbearance and strength. There was a row of black cars lined up in front of the airport. Countless soldiers of Jianghu state got into the cars. The vehicles, like a long line, started slowly. From beginning to end, the faces of these soldiers were never photographed. Angel was not sure what this meant. Compared with Jiang Qianyan's face that appeared in the camera intentionally or unintentionally in Wulon State, the backs of Jianghu State soldiers were somewhat meaningful. Was this the position and attitude that the Eastern European news had not clearly expressed? Behind the Eastern European news was the Qin family of Baiyu State. The Qin family, which was close to the Qin clan. In the chaos of Eastern Europe, the position of the Qin family was definitely one of the things that attracted the most attention. Angel wasn't sure if the news was telling the truth. It was the Jiang family of South America that was attacked in Wulon State. Angel looked at the ending news screen, thought for a moment, and then slowly said, "Obviously." A soft but somewhat evil voice sounded. "I talked to Jiang Qianyan on the phone. It was the two highnesses of Sai City in Jianghu State who attacked. Not only the manor on TV, but also another club in Reki City where the elites of the Jiang family of South America were placed suffered heavy losses. This is the revenge of Jianghu State." Not far from Angel sat a very quiet man. A man with a unique temperament. His appearance was between that of a young man and a middle-aged man, and his figure was slightly thin. He seemed to be handsome, but also very ordinary. The light shone on him. His smile was quiet and calm, but his face was a little blurred. He was the chief knight of Knights Templars. In the dark world, his identity was the master of Knights Templars, an invincible realm expert. Chaos. Angel glanced at him. Hearing the two highnesses of Sai City, her eyes were a little complicated. But when her eyes fell on Chaos, her eyes had become calm. "You don't seem to be worried?" Angel asked. Chaos looked at the face behind the veil, which was even blurrier than his. His eyes were gentle and humble, but behind this facade, there was a scorching heat that could burn everything. Chaos looked at him for a long time. He bowed slightly and said calmly, "I don't know what your Highness Holy Virgin means." The status of the chief knight of Knights Templars was very high in the dark world. But the entire Knights Templars was a vassal institution of the Vatican. Its position within the Vatican was even lower than that of the bishops, the saint warriors, and the holy punishment priests. Strictly speaking, it was not an institution that could sit in front of the Holy Virgin. He could sit in front of Angel calmly because he was an invincible realm expert. That was all. "You know very well." Angel looked into Chaos's eyes. "You know that this is the revenge of Jianghu State. Your Excellency, what reason do you have to think that Jianghu State will only retaliate against the Jiang family of South America and let Knights Templars go? You joined hands with the Jiang family of South America and killed not only the elites of Samsara Palace, but also the garrison of Jianghu State. This is very stupid. Should I congratulate you for attracting the attention of Jianghu State?" Chaos was silent for a while. After a long time he slowly said, "I didn't slaughter the garrison of Jianghu State." Angel nodded. "Sounds like it's true. But does anyone believe it?" She looked at Chaos coldly. "I don't believe it. It doesn't matter whether you believe it or not." Chaos shook his head. "No means no. I will explain it to Jianghu State. They believe it, and then the two have nothing to do with each other. They don't believe it. Knights Templars has never been afraid of war since its establishment. I will also shoulder my responsibilities. Your Highness Holy Virgin can rest assured that the victory in the chaos of Eastern Europe belongs to the Vatican and Knights Templars. I appreciate a lot of qualities." Angel's tone was cold. "But I don't appreciate arrogance. Your Excellency, your courage is commendable, but your stupidity is equally surprising. You are not afraid of war, but from the standpoint of the Vatican, at this stage, neither the Vatican nor Knights Templars should attract the attention of Jianghu State. In the chaos of Eastern Europe, Jianghu State has not only the two highnesses of Sai City, but also a more terrifying majesty, a younger highness, and an entire special warfare battalion. In the face of such power, what is Knights Templars?" Chaos narrowed his eyes, lowered his head and remained silent. "You said you didn't slaughter the garrison of Jianghu State." Angel took a deep breath, stood up, and said slowly, "I don't believe it. No one believes it. But I can give you 3 days. Within 3 days, come up with a reason that everyone can believe. Your Excellency, I'll wait for your news." It was a long time. In the oppressive silence, Chaos also stood up. You don't want to provoke Jianghu state. He looked at Angel. Is it because of fear? Angel pointed to the door with a poker face and said blandly, "No matter what, this is my order." Chaos twitched the corner of his mouth and nodded. "I will try my best." He turned around and strode out of the bell tower. Angel looked at his back. His back was very straight and fearless. Fearlessness was precious, but sometimes it seemed extremely arrogant. Angel turned around and looked out of the window. The everlasting night outside the window was getting darker and darker. The sun had fallen, and it would not rise for a long time. Angel looked at it quietly and muttered to herself, "The arrogant will pay the price." Outside the bell tower, Chaos, who had walked out of the bell tower, was also looking at the light inside the bell tower and whispered, "The coward will lose everything." Was a small country. With an area of more than 20,000 square kilometers, it was even less than the smallest province in Jianghu state. Not to mention the whole world, even in Europe, or even limited to Eastern Europe, was not eye-catching. In the past 100 years, this was a country that had always been in a state of ups and downs, and it was also one of the small countries with the most frequent civil strife in Eastern Europe. At the most chaotic time, had had 12 governments in 10 years, which was simply dazzling. This situation lasted until Jianghu state gave assistance. After Jianghu state helped the chaos slowly calmed down. At that time, at the delicate moment when the major forces in Eastern Europe checked and balanced each other and did not want to easily intervene in the chaos of the assistance of Jianghu state was thunderous. The first army that appeared in was about 8,000 people, not many, but they were famous. After the troop code-named Desolate Border returned to Jianghu state, they really went to Desolate Border, which was the predecessor of today's Border Control Corps. At that time, it was Li Honghe, the state-protecting war god of Jianghu state, and Li Guangtu, the two highnesses, who personally led the troops to support The father and son stood in faced the various means of many Eastern European forces, and finally nailed the garrison near the capital of At that time, this was the first garrison of Jianghu state stationed in Eastern Europe. Later, Jianghu state used the garrison as a starting point and spent several years slowly building the Arctic Ocean Command that deterred the whole of Eastern Europe. So when it came to the Li family, and Jianghu state, there were too many soul-stirring, heartwarming, or blood-boiling stories in between. Li Tianlan now led the Snow Dance Corps to When he thought about it carefully, it seemed that it was really a bit predestined. Perhaps because he knew all the stories of that year, Li Tianlan had been silent since he walked out of the airport. The motorcade entered the capital from the airport in silence, and then entered the garrison camp of Jianghu state. Terence, the deputy prime minister of and the foreign minister, had already confirmed the itinerary of the president and the prime minister. After booking the welcome dinner tomorrow evening, he left. Lieutenant General Cheng Huaining, the former commander of the Black Dragon Army of the Border Control Corps and the current commander of the Arctic Ocean Command, invited Li Tianlan to his study and said that he wanted to report on work. The logistics director of the Arctic Ocean Command began to arrange accommodation for the officers of the Snowdance Corps. After the attack, Jianghu state was furious, and the number of garrison troops in continued to increase. Now there were nearly 20,000 troops of Jianghu state stationed in The exact number was 19,832. There were nearly 20,000 people in the garrison camp, but no one in the camp belonged to the garrison of the Arctic Ocean Command. At this time, it was the entire Snowdance Corps that was stationed in The ordinary soldiers of the Snowdance Corps had entered Eastern Europe in batches before the high-level list was confirmed. As soon as the officers were in place today, the entire Snowdance Corps had begun to operate. Li Tianlan didn't care about the 9 officers. It took a process for the officers and the army to get familiar with each other, even if they were all elites. He followed Cheng Huaining to the study in silence. He sat down in silence. Cheng Huaining turned on the TV without saying a word and watched the recently popular Eastern European news channel. The two of them sat on the sofa, ignoring each other, without even a cup of tea. Cheng Huaining took out a cigarette and lit it. He didn't give it to Li Tianlan. He crossed his legs and watched the TV with relish. Li Tianlan sat there in silence, motionless and silent. Less than 5 minutes passed. There was a knock on the door slowly, neither fast nor slow. Cheng Huaining frowned and said loudly, "Come in, please." The door was pushed open. A slender and somewhat effeminate man walked in slowly with a peaceful smile. Vice Marshal Chen? Chang Huaining stood up with a smile and shook hands with the effeminate man. Li Tianlan still didn't move. Chen Qingwan, the vice marshal of the Snow Dance Corps, walked into the study. A trace of displeasure flashed through his heart, but he didn't show it. He also knew that it was a little abrupt and unsightly for him to come over. But he was the vice marshal of the Snow Dance Corps. In addition to the responsibilities given to him by Zhongzhou State, he also had other tasks. Chang Huaining and Li Tianlan. Both of their positions were very sensitive. He had to know what they talked about and what arrangements they had so that he could play a role in the next action. Li Tianlan gave him the cold shoulder, so he could only put up with it. Your Highness, General Cheng, what are you talking about? Chen Qingwan asked with a smile. We're just watching TV. We didn't talk about anything. Chang Huaining smiled and asked Chen Qingwan to sit down. Chen Qingwan rolled his eyes and glanced at Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan still sat in that position. In a trance, his figure seemed to shake slightly and become more and more illusory. Chen Qingwan suddenly felt that something was wrong. He frowned and tentatively called, Your Highness. Chang Huaining smiled but didn't say anything. He looked at Chen Qingwan with a well-concealed mockery in his eyes. Chen Qingwan's face changed. He suddenly walked over and reached out, as if to put his hand on Li Tianlan's shoulder intimately. His palm fell, but he touched nothing. His palm passed through Li Tianlan's body. Li Tianlan's figure shook in the study and then disappeared completely. Chen Qingwan froze and turned to look at Chang Huaining. At this moment, he vaguely seemed to understand why he hadn't seen the legendary bodyguard beside Li Tianlan since he got off the plane. Because he didn't see the two deputy commanders of the Snow Dance Corps, let alone the two sword masters of Mount Shu. What are you thinking about, Vice Marshal Chen? Chang Huaining asked with a smile and pointed to the TV. Watch the news. In the news, the dignified and beautiful host was telling about a mysterious attack in Reki City, the capital of Wulan State. Chang Huaining was watching the news. Jiang Chenyan was also watching the news. The Eastern European news channel was really popular. At least the superpowers in Eastern Europe were paying close attention to this channel every day. The losses after the attack tonight had been sorted out as quickly as possible. The manor plus the club. Situ Tsongyue and Tribulation attacked at the same time. Less than 80 of the 400 elites survived. Nearly half of the elites of the Jiang family of South America stationed in Reki City were lost. This result made Jiang Chenyan lose all his good mood, but he didn't know who to vent his anger on. He brought the remaining 70 or so elites with him. The Rekvia family had rearranged a manor for him. Back in the manor, Jiang Chenyan stared absent-mindedly at the Eastern European news on TV. His eyes were cold, and he wondered if he should report the loss to his elder brother. In the news screen, the faces of Jiang Chenyan and Shenker, the current patriarch of Rekvia, flashed in the picture. Soon after, the news skipped, and the backs of Im and the Snow Dance Corps appeared. It was the backs. Jiang Chenyan snorted heavily and muttered to himself, The Qin family. He took out his cell phone and was about to dial when the doorbell suddenly rang. Jiang Chenyan frowned and picked up the intercom device beside him. What's the matter? Second Master. Mr. Shenker is visiting. He has entered the manor. Shenker Rekvia. Jiang Chenyan froze. He had no reason not to pay attention to his strongest ally in Eastern Europe. He put down the phone, stood up, and said, I'll go down and pick it up. He quickly went downstairs. When he walked out of the main villa, he could already see the lights of a row of motorcades. The motorcade stopped in front of the villa. Shenker, the patriarch of the Rekvia family, who had just parted with Jiang Chenyan, got out of the car with a smile and shook hands with Jiang Chenyan. Mr. Jiang, the Snow Dance Corps has entered Eastern Europe. Shenker chuckled. I know. Jiang Chenyan nodded. But there is one thing you may not know. In the sequence of the Snow Dance Corps entering Im, there are very few heavyweight experts missing. At present we can't determine their. Jiang Chenyan. Before Shenker finished speaking, a flat voice suddenly sounded. The voice was so far away and so real, as if it were close to the ear, clear and calm. There were only 3 words in the title. But as the word Nian fell, the whole night sky shook. Jiang Chenyan. Jiang Chenyan. Jiang Qianyan. The empty night seemed to suddenly become a mountain wall, and the clear and empty voice kept echoing in the night. Xianxia's words disappeared in Jiang Qianyan's ears. He suddenly raised his head and looked at the night sky in the distance. The night was deep. A little dot appeared in the deep night. The white dot was very clear, as if it were carved in the illusory night, sharp and clear. The white dot was moving. With incomparably arrogant killing intent, it covered the entire manor. The white dot quickly drew closer, and in a trance, it was like a meteor piercing the darkness. Come. The white dot began to expand and turned white. Wherever the white passed, it instantly drew 100-meter-long shadow in the night sky. Kill. The white turned into a figure, dressed as white as snow. You. The sword light condensed around the white figure. It's. As the voice fell. In an instant, the overwhelming sword intent surged above the whole sky, like a waterfall flowing straight down, like a raging tide rising to the sky, mighty and roaring. There was no raging fire, no thunder, no void. There was only sword intent. A silver light appeared in Jiang Qianyan's sight. In the sword intent all over the sky, everything around him seemed to disappear completely. The manor, the lawn, the fountain, the lights, everything seemed to exist, but it was so unreal. Even the white figure became illusory. Only the silver sword light that filled the night sky and tore the whole sky was so clear. Between reality and illusion, there was only one sword, moving forward with indomitable will. No words could describe this sword. This sword appeared quickly and abruptly. The silver edge ran through heaven and earth, and Jiang Qianyan could not even judge the power of this sword. Under the huge threat of life, he instinctively grabbed Xianxia beside him and retreated at full speed. The silver edge became the only thing in the night. The silver light drew a straight line without any detour and rushed into the villa in an instant. Boom! The surging sword intent exploded amidst the flying dust and stones. Lights, blood, gravel, smoke, and the wreckage of cars and appliances were mixed together. The sword light turned into a wave of air that swept hundreds of meters around with the smoke and dust. Wherever the wave of air passed, the surrounding lawns and fountains were completely destroyed. In the sword intent that was hot but without fire, the original green manor turned into a desert in an instant. Countless corpses were torn into blood foam and flew out. Jiang Qianyan pulled Xianxia to watch this sword, and his face became completely distorted. The figure that rushed into the villa was covered with smoke and dust, blurred. But the clear footsteps accompanied by a loud heartbeat kept ringing in the smoke and dust. Who is it? Xianxia stared at the smoke and dust in front of him with a pale face. He swallowed and suddenly roared. The smoke and dust slowly flew into the night sky. The blood fell slowly to the ground with the stones. Rekvia's second manor became a ruin again and a desert at the same time. In the chaos, a snow-like white dress slowly walked out of the smoke and dust ruins. The clear and flat voice sounded in the night with a surging sword intent, echoing throughout the nearby world. Chapter 410. Jianghu State. Li Tianlan. On this night, the name seemed to echo over the whole Reki city. The voice was clear and bright, spreading in the air and deeply imprinted in everyone's heart. The blazing sword will dispel the coldness of the night. Blood fell, dust rose into the air, and the sword chi surged in the air. Thus, the rising dust turned into a storm, sweeping up the smell of blood and blowing through the entire manor. In the chaotic flying dust, that figure slowly walked out, appearing in everyone's line of sight. White clothes, silver sword. Through the dust, the figure in Jiang Qianyan's sight was blurred, but he could clearly feel the unparalleled sharpness of the other party. His facial muscles twitched and trembled, and for a moment he looked extremely complicated. He really didn't expect Li Tianlan to be here. He also didn't expect that after Sai City, the revenge of the Snowdance Corps would come so soon. He just saw the news. How long had it been since the entire Snowdance Corps arrived in Eastern Europe? Calculating the time, the other party killed him without hesitation as soon as he got out of the airport, without even a moment's delay. The other party was obviously prepared. Jiang Qianyan's eyes gradually became ferocious. If the surprise attack of the two highnesses of Sai City tonight was a slap in his face, then Li Tianlan's sword was the second consecutive slap. Situ Congyue and Situ Wanjie. The two invincible realm experts hadn't made a move in front of him, but now such a young junior directly killed him with a sword. If he still couldn't respond tonight, where was the face of the Jiang family of South America? A powerful country valued power. A wealthy family also valued power. Like the Wang family of Beihai, their power had lasted hundreds of years of invincibility and glory. The Jiang family of South America, on the other hand, had hundreds of years of cold-bloodedness and deceit. Li Tan Lan, Jiang Chenyan suddenly laughed. His voice was so soft that it was almost a whisper, but the resentment and coldness in it came to his face. It was particularly cold. From any standpoint, Jiang Chenyan had a reason not to let Li Tianlan go. In the decisive Battle of Heaven Capital 3 years ago, the Jiang family of South America plotted against the Samsara Palace. Not only did they lose soldiers and generals, but even one of their hidden pawns in the killer world was killed by Li Tianlan. Xianxia. In the final Battle of Heaven Capital, it should have been his most glorious stage, and it was also the glorious moment of the Jiang family of South America's invincible family. As a result, evil died, and the Jiang family of South America's plan failed. Qin Weibai, on the other hand, was a woman that Jiang Chenyan truly appreciated and even loved. But his goddess had belonged to Li Tianlan a few years ago. As for tonight, Li Tianlan once again made him lose face. New enmity. Old enmity. Jiang Chenyan's killing intent rose to its peak in an instant. The new highness of Zhongzhou State, a 22-year-old with the combat capability of the invincible realm. Li Tianlan was very strong, and his martial arts were very special. But no matter how strong and special he was, he only had the combat capability of the invincible realm, not even the real invincible realm. This kind of strength was quite good in the entire dark world. But was this the reason why Li Tianlan kept coming to get revenge on him? Jiang Chenyan really laughed. He was angry, but at the same time, he found it extremely ridiculous. Today, Jiang Chenyan seemed to want to say something. But Li Tianlan did not give him any chance at all. All the grudges were laid out there for everyone to see. The vows were still vivid, and everyone could hear them. Li Tianlan gave his name. Now that he could do it, why talk nonsense? The sword intent was hot and ethereal. The silver edge of the sword shone with a sharp light. Li Tianlan raised falling stars in his hand for a moment. The smoke-filled night sky seemed to suddenly change. From illusion to reality. In an instant, the sword energy soared into the sky. The violent sword intent, centered on Li Tianlan, suddenly burst out in a continuous stream. The sword was not condensed, but it directly covered the whole place. Jiang Chenyan's expression suddenly changed, and he said angrily, "How dare you?" His roar rang out in the sword intent, but then disappeared. Jiang Chenyan put down Xianxia beside him and pounced directly on Li Tianlan. He saw the purpose of the sword. Although the sword covered Jiang Chenyan, most of the sword energy was spreading toward the surrounding elites of the Jiang family of South America. Jiang Chenyan's figure passed through the sword intent in a rage. Almost in the blink of an eye, he had appeared in front of Li Tianlan. The sword intent spread out in the blade of falling stars. Li Tianlan suddenly laughed, and his figure suddenly disappeared from Jiang Chenyan's sight. At the same time, in Reki City, outside a luxuriously decorated resort in the west of the city, two exceptionally charming middle-aged men and women were standing in front of the door, quietly watching the lights in the resort. The interior of the originally extremely relaxing resort was now filled with a tense atmosphere. Under the lights, this area was completely in a state of alert, as if it was facing a great enemy. Even the burly security guards in the resort were solemn and respectful. Look at the situation. The Jiang family is making a lot of noise in Eastern Europe. If it weren't for the low temperature, I would have thought we were in South America. The middle-aged man with a long sword on his back squinted at the lights in his line of sight and chuckled. This was a man who looked very good when he smiled. His facial features were handsome and gentle, and even his eyes seemed to be emitting a strong smile. Me. The man looked at the woman beside him and smiled. Or you. I'm in a hurry. The woman said in a flat tone. No need. Before the man's smiling voice fell, the woman beside him had suddenly disappeared. The next moment, the woman's figure appeared directly over the resort. The air over the resort suddenly twisted. The airflow roared wildly. In the almost violent momentum, the sword intent continued to hover all the way up. A vortex with a radius of hundreds of meters suddenly appeared in the dark night. "Let's hurry." Only then did the man's voice fall completely. The resort security guards had noticed the abnormality of the man and the woman. A pair of security guards came over cautiously. Suddenly, they saw the woman disappear and subconsciously froze. The night in the resort seemed to be getting darker. The smiling man's whole body had been completely infected by darkness. So in the security guard's sight, even the man's body disappeared. Only a kind reminder sounded in their ears. "The wind is rising." The wind suddenly rose over the resort. Eastern Europe, which was already cold, seemed to cool down suddenly. The huge whirlpool in the air was still spinning, but it was no longer tangible and intangible. The entire whirlpool began to freeze in an extremely short period of time. The frost filled the air and quickly melted. Amidst the strong winds, heavy rain appeared above the resort. The fierce wind and heavy rain swept down without warning. The heavy rain was like a sword. The raindrops fell, but they did not hit the ground. Instead, they hit everything unscrupulously as the wind blew. The sword-like rain refracted shadows all over the sky in the night. For a time, the whole resort was full of sword-like rain whistling. There was chaos in the resort, and the strong fire rose in the heavy rain. Before the elites of the Jianghu family of South America stationed here had time to gather, the darkness had quietly enveloped the light and filled the entire manor. The sword-like rain fell more wildly in the darkness, and shrill screams rang out continuously. In the deep darkness, the fire occasionally lit up for a moment and then went out completely. Only the blue lightning of the thunder-shocking realm could maintain its own light in the darkness. But somehow, the moment a few thunder-shocking realm experts held up the light quickly disappeared in the darkness. The experts of the fire-flaming realm of the Jianghu family of South America began to gather. More than a dozen experts of the fire-flaming realm gathered together. The moment the fire broke through the darkness, the dazzling light came instantly with terrifying heat. Light and darkness alternated repeatedly. In the extreme light changes, everyone in the Jianghu family of South America was in chaos. Light and darkness were intertwined and perfectly integrated with the heavy rain all over the sky, turning into a storm mixed with several kinds of sword intents. The storm almost flattened the whole resort. In the shadow of death and shrill screams, a male voice with a smile sounded in the air, gentle and kind. "Snow Dance Corps, Han Chongyang, Yun Qinchi, send you on your way." Han Chongyang liked to talk. On this occasion, he knew that his second senior sister would not speak, so he simply said it for her. The heavy rain and the light blended completely. Phantom sword, intangible phantom of Mount Shu. Yin and Yang sword, Yin and Yang formless of Mount Shu. The sword energy blended together and spread wildly in the center of the resort. From beginning to end, no thunder-shocking realm expert of the Jianghu family of South America took action. In the war in the Dark World, the number of people was indeed an advantage. But to exert this advantage, the experts in their own camp also needed to temporarily contain the enemy. No thunder-shocking realm expert of the Jianghu family of South America took action. A group of elites of the fire-flaming realm and the ice-condensing realm faced the sword intents of two half-step invincible realm experts without any preparation. In the messy scene, it was almost a complete massacre. In the extremely chaotic scene, a horrified voice suddenly sounded. "Mr. Jiang Yunxi was killed. Mr. Dark Knight is dead. Mr. Tong is dead." Horrified voices rang out one after another. Jiang Yunxi, Dark Knight, Mr. Tong. They were the three thunder-shocking realm experts stationed in the resort. One was at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm, and the other two were at the stabilization phase of the thunder-shocking realm. Not only them, but in the resort, some experts at the peak of the fire-flaming realm also died silently in the chaos. Yin-Yang sword intents and phantom sword intents were very strong. But the two kinds of sword intents blended, and it was absolutely impossible to wipe out these experts at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm and the fire-flaming realm so easily. After losing these experts, the elites of the Jianghu family of South America in the resort had no room to resist in the face of the horrible sword intent falling from the sky. Assassin. There are assassins. The sword intent was flying and spreading. The blade in the dark seemed to be assassinating the fewer and fewer experts of the Jianghu family of South America one by one. The chaotic camp completely collapsed, and the elites of the Jianghu family of South America began to flee in all directions. As if to match the words of Han Chongyang, the Phantom Swordmaster, Another clear and polite voice sounded in the night. But in the ears of the elites of the Jiang family of South America, it was like a demon's whisper. Cool breeze and drifting cloud of Sai City send you on your way. This is the first half of the chapter. I can't write anymore. I have a terrible headache and feel dizzy. I can't continue to write well. If I can't write well, I'd better write less. You're tuning in to the Wisdom Diary YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.